So I'm Josh, and this is my unnamed guest. What's
Yeah,
therapy?
and I thought about it. I don't mind saying we're cousins. That's not. I don't think that's gonna dox me.
You don't think it's evident by your facial hair?
It probably is slightly evident, but knowing cousins is hard to tell. But yeah, I don't mind sharing that. Yeah, I'll just keep my name and the state I live in private. But yeah, yeah, I'm what's therapy. But yeah.
Where's that name come from?
It comes from it's kind of has a double meaning. Like it's like, hey, I'll explain therapy to you, and like, what's therapy? Like, I don't want to think about therapy because I do it all day, and I want to do like anything else. So it's like, what's therapy? Oh, I don't want to think about that. Let's talk about some other crap. So has like a nice double meaning.
So you're discarding the idea of talking about therapy.
Most people, when they see the username, because I made it my RuneScape username, I'm not ashamed to admit, they'll be like, "Are you making fun of therapy?" And I'm like, "No, I'm a therapist, but I just yeah, it's because relatively small amount of the stuff I do is like explaining therapy and mental health, maybe more ultimately, but yeah, it's just a nice. It's a very interesting thing. What is therapy? I think is a good like it's an actually good question. I think like what is therapy? It's two people talking. It's a weird thing. So yeah, I just thought it was an interesting premise, sort of, for a channel. But yeah, what does Josh mean? Where does that come from?
The Torah, I guess. My parents thought it was a good idea.
Nice. That's great. I like
Doesn't
that.
mean anything to me. It means that people call me John all the time, like when I ran errands today, and
Really?
I don't correct them. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a problem with my articulation either. People
Oh,
just
really?
seem to hear what they want to hear, and I let them.
That's funny. People call me Darren all the time, and I definitely think it's a problem with my enunciation. I'm gonna post this on my Twitter. I only have like a small number of people following, but there's a chance one or
Oh,
two
you're
people.
live. I forgot about that.
Right? Yeah. I don't know. Do you care? I don't need to. I mean, no one's gonna come check it out, honestly.
Not with that attitude. No, I don't care.
Okay.
So I'll give you a choice of two topics that I want to start with.
Okay.
Either let's talk about deplatforming, cancel culture, one of those things,
Yeah.
whatever you want to call it, that phenomenon,
Yeah.
or we can discuss more of the rise to prominence of Jordan Peterson.
Ooh. Well, let's start with the just deplatforming, I guess, and cancel culture, because
Okay,
I'm sure I'll have so much to say about the latter. But
sure.
yeah, like you sent me a text like last week that was a news article of who was it? The person getting.
Yeah, she just got promoted to be, I believe, editor of Teen Vogue. I don't know her name,
Oh, I
but
thought it was her getting fired or something.
yeah. She had just gotten promoted to that position, and
Oh,
as she was taking the position on, she got fired.
so
I believe that's the timeline.
and what? Remind me what it was. We don't need to use this as an example. I just know we didn't talk about it, and you sent it to me. What did she say or do? I don't.
Yeah, so the woman we're talking about, her name is Alexi McCammond, and she was named editor in chief of Teen Vogue
Okay.
earlier this month, so the beginning of March. And then presumably some motivated users looked into her
Hmm.
and found that she had tweeted some stuff.
Yeah.
So people were retweeting disgusting tweets from her, quote.
Were they like
So
just like offensive with or in some
yeah,
regard?
so I'll
Yeah.
read them to you verbatim.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
there's only a couple of them that were really publicized. So, quote,
Yeah.
give me a 2 out of 10 on my chem problem, cross out all of my work, and don't explain what I did wrong. Thanks a lot, stupid Asian TA. You're great. Another
That's
tweet. Now,
yeah.
Googling how not to wake up with swollen Asian eyes.
Oh my
One,
God. Okay.
one more, outdone by Asian. Hashtag what's new.
Okay.
So I think we can both agree these were, um, at the very least, racially insensitive, and
Yeah.
maybe at the very worst, racist and bigoted.
I think it's fair to call them racist. Sometimes I use the phrasing like racially biased because racist just like activates so many people and stuff. But yeah,
Yep.
we good. Okay, we can agree these are racist. There's a clear pattern. She's like denigrating Asian people for the stereotypical shit, and
Yep. So there's a caveat here. I think if she had posted this two weeks earlier, I think most people would agree that she isn't fit for some sort of public-facing position like that.
Yeah.
The caveat is she posted these a decade ago in 2019, or I apologize, when she was 17, and then has since apologized for them as recently as 2019.
She was
so
how old?
Yeah,
did you say she was?
She was 17 when she posted
17
these.
when she posted that. Yeah.
So old enough to be making decisions that affect others throughout the world and be held accountable for it. You know, you commit murder when you're 17, you're going to prison.
Yeah.
But I think long enough ago and early enough in your development that there's a degree of excusability. And I don't think that's 100% exoneration.
Right.
But to me, it's a sliding scale. So if I did something really, really off color or racist when I was 11, I think it'd be wrong to be holding me accountable for that now.
Yeah.
But when I was, 18, you have a much better argument, I think. And so as a society, we need to make these decisions about how accountable do we hold these people?
Right.
How long do you want to hold on to people's baggage of really awful behavior? Because I think there's a trade-off between promoting healthy growth as an individual, which builds a more cohesive, understanding society, and this vilification, because this is why I bring it up. I focus in on what I see as this focused hurt mob mentality where there's this pile-on effect. And people, it's like, you ever see sharks feed in the open ocean? Someone smells blood in the water and everyone else keeps coming. And it's a powerful tool. So I want to give you a chance to respond to some of the things
I agree with like everything you're saying, essentially. Like I'm a therapist. I obviously think people can grow. You know what I mean? Like I obviously think people should not be defined by their past mistakes and are not defined by their past mistakes. I don't know if it's worth going into like metaphysical crap, but like I don't believe in like a coherent, like universal identity that like persists throughout your life. I believe that we change and acquire traits, and I think it's and lose traits. I think it's always more useful to talk about someone's behavior than to talk about like their self as who they are. So I don't even think of people as like bad people. It's not a useful concept normally in my way of seeing things. It's only useful insofar as you're like banning them from spaces they can do more harm. Like, and the question here is like, was she doing harm? Like, probably not. I don't know. Assuming she was doing a perfectly good job as an editor and so on, not like, having more anti-Asian articles or anything like that. If we're assuming like it's something she really has learned from, you said she like apologized and so on. Like, yeah, I think she should be able to keep the job. I don't think someone should be defined by something they did when they're 17. I don't think she's probably not still racist against Asians. There's no reason to assume that just because she was racist when she was 17, she's still racist, I guess is my way of seeing it. That being said, who do we get mad at? We can get mad at people for piling on and so on, but I don't, like, what's the point of it? Like, yeah, we disagree with people piling on and making it their, day's work to get pissed off at some stranger and so on. But I guess the question is, like, are you mad also at Teen Vogue? Like, do you think they're doing the wrong thing? And if so, yeah, what do you expect them to do otherwise?
May I try to summarize your viewpoint and you tell me what I get wrong?
Yeah, totally.
You don't see this as that big of a deal. Like, you don't really care that this is a thing and you don't think it's noteworthy. Like, you wouldn't even be talking about it. And you think it's silly that people like me narrow in on this and make it a bigger deal than it is.
There's truth to that, but that's not really my argument here, because I don't think I need to make that argument. Like, I think that if this is worth like talking about. I think it's obviously a small thing compared to a lot of other things, but I get that your argument is like this represents a bigger issue and like can either be a slippery slope or is part of what's already a slippery slope to like, people being held accountable to a ridiculous, absurd degree that is unnecessary and unhelpful. So I'm not even necessarily trying to say like it's a small thing, it doesn't matter. I guess what I'm saying is like if it does matter, who are we mad at? Who's the one doing the wrong thing? Like, yeah.
So ultimately, I think that there's two people or factions to point blame at.
Yeah.
The individuals on Twitter, angry individuals who are making a big deal about this,
Yeah.
who themselves could be 17-year-olds doing
Yeah.
something that they wouldn't look back on with pride.
Right.
Ultimately, it comes down to the company that fires someone based on public backlash.
Yeah.
And I think this is where we got to the last time we talked about this.
Yeah.
I believe your point was this is just a free market deciding to do whatever it wants to do. And there's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. If
Right.
they think that this is a winning strategy, let them employ that strategy.
Right.
And I'm certainly not making a legal argument that they shouldn't be able to. Of
Yeah.
course they should be able to. But I don't think it's healthy. There's this element of selective prosecution that's in law. You don't want, if there's someone evading their taxes,
Yeah.
you want to prosecute all of them.
Mhm.
You don't want to just prosecute Donald Trump if there's
Right.
evidence that he's evading his taxes, because
Right.
now you're pointing the government at whoever is your enemy. And so there's this element of we're going after whoever is important to us. And I
Yeah.
think there's this element of a standard that is difficult to follow,
Yeah.
ever changing, and pointed at whoever we decide.
Sure. So ultimately, who you think ultimate more responsibility is on the company than the people getting mad? Like, is it fair to say, like, because the
I
company?
think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so. Institutions need not,
Yeah.
they have to resist the temptation to bend to the will of the loudest minority.
Okay, so that's the thing I always get to when I talk with people who I disagree with about this, because this idea that it's a minority that is being catered to. Because I guess I find, like, we could try to determine, I guess, whether it's a minority or majority. That would be very hard to, like, determine empirically. Like, do a minority of people view those tweets as offensive or whatever, and, like, want her to be not held accountable? But companies don't do things based on, like majority, like, they don't survey everyone in the world. They care about their audience. So a company is getting bad press and does the simplest thing possible to end the bad press. I don't necessarily support their decision. I really don't. But what should they have done differently? Should they have come out and say, and again, I don't know the facts of this case, maybe there's more stuff, but should they have come out and say, like, should they have maybe not come out themselves, but given her a platform and say, like, you need to, make it right, apologize, and if people can forgive you, then they can forgive. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, why are we assuming they're catering to a minority? Maybe that's the simplest question to ask. Like,
As opposed to a majority?
yeah, why are we assuming that it's a loud minority rather than I guess, why is that the assumption? When we're saying a company is catering to their financial incentives, why do we build in this assumption that it's a loud minority? I don't know where that comes from.
I suppose total number of people lodging complaints via Twitter, that number is a lot smaller than the total number of readers of Teen Vogue.
Right.
So by definition, it would be a minority of their, I wouldn't call them stakeholders because that's an overused term, but
Sure, no, but that's
consumer
fair, yeah.
base, reader base.
Yeah.
My perception is that, and I don't want to get off this topic, but
Sure.
perhaps it's a good time to.
Sure.
With the recent Dr. Seuss debacle, with the paper being released by two quasi-academics, Katie Ishizuka and Ramon Stevens.
Okay.
They wrote a paper and created a snowball effect where a large number of people piled onto this movement, whereas previously, I don't believe that there was a slowly growing majority of Americans that were demanding that Dr. Seuss was racist and needed to be canceled.
But I see a lot of people agreeing now that I had never heard of these Dr. Seuss books.
I do see a lot of people agreeing, but I don't think they're agreeing because they actually have reached that conclusion based on forming a rational opinion. I think people do this out of fear.
Okay.
And that is a scary proposition to me.
I think that's an assumption.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I totally cut you off. Yeah.
I think I can substantiate that. I don't think you're right. It is an assumption, but I think it's a good assumption.
Okay.
I think that you can analyze the interpersonal mechanics at play here and understand why a human being would acquiesce to this sort of line of thinking.
Sure.
And I think that it's appeasement, essentially. You are, if there's an element of self-preservation, which humans are very good at, all living things are generally good at that, or they don't reproduce for very many generations. So there's this element of, I don't want to have this gun turned on me. So what's the best thing? Let me stand behind the person who's currently wielding the gun. I think that is absolutely at play here. And the gun's a metaphor, but perhaps it's a job at stake.
But then if people feed into this by joining the feeding frenzy, aren't they then feeding the thing that could be turned on themselves?
There's a deep irony in that, and yes, they are. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
I think that's a flaw in your logic. I think that's a flaw in the assumption that people are doing this out of self-preservation. But let me just speak for myself.
No, follow that line. I love that.
Say what?
Follow that line of thinking. I love that. I don't think that's over.
Well, how do you mean? Yeah, I'm happy to follow it. Like, I mean, I don't think it makes sense to say people are canceling Dr. Seuss books out of self-preservation. I like that would never be the thing that comes to mind for me. So when I hear you make that argument, I immediately think, well, isn't there a flaw in that logic? Because couldn't that same cancel culture come back on them? And you're saying that's ironic in the sense that people aren't thinking it through. But let me tell you what I think. And this is my own personal opinion, and I don't speak for like everybody on leftist Twitter, but I am on leftist Twitter, and I do see what people say. My sense is people say like, so I'm speaking for myself and potentially other people. I didn't know those Dr. Seuss books existed. I had never heard of those Dr. Seuss books. Mm-hmm. I had never seen them. I had never been exposed to them. Dr. Seuss was perfectly race neutral in my understanding. I didn't think he was stereotyping anyone and so on. When I saw those, I said, those suck. I don't want those being published by the same guy who's apparently a children's author. Like, come on. So I see that and I say, take them out of print. If some people want to find them, they'll buy them on eBay or something. We don't need to be printing those. Now, they weren't much in print because I don't think most people had heard of them. But I think what a lot of people realize is, like similar to me, people who agree with me, realize those books seem to probably have a net negative effect. And like you can say taking them out of circulation is a sign of something bad that could itself like have a worse effect. But I think that's an assumption. I see them as just taking sort of harmful material out of circulation, you know?
Do you feel that we should do that with Mein Kampf?
No, because that's so much like a facet of history. But if a publisher decided right now we're going to publish like 1 million copies of Mein Kampf and people protested it and then the company decided not to, I would say fantastic. Because that's my personal opinion. They don't need to publish more copies of it. But no, I don't think I think it's different. Like, it's different. That's of like significant historical value. I don't think the Dr. Seuss books.
And this isn't. It's difficult for you to judge what is and isn't of deep historical value when it's happening.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, but Mein Kampf is like so clearly of historical value, right? Like anybody can agree that. Like he wrote it in prison. It's like the formation of his ideas and stuff. Like it's a big deal. It's apparently a shitty work of writing. I haven't read it. I don't know, but
I wouldn't assume what everyone agrees on, Derek.
Hitler canceled by literary critic. No, but yeah, no. So I do think it's of historical value. Are these books of historical value? Maybe to some degree. I would say like a small degree compared to Mein Kampf, like a ridiculously small degree. But does it make more sense to get mad at these books not being published than to get mad at them being published?
May I just go back to something that you said that I didn't have a chance to touch on?
Yeah.
You said you've no problem with the publisher stopping publishing them. I'm not sure that I actually have a huge problem with that. If they own the rights to the works and they don't want to publish it for whatever reason, that's totally their right.
Yeah.
I think their reason is poor.
Okay.
But I see the argument. I get it.
Yeah.
You then said, if people want to then buy the book on eBay, go for it.
Yeah.
Well, eBay banned the sale of these books on eBay.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So the
Yeah, so
next
people
day
would have to
after this
try very
happened,
hard. They would have to try very hard if they want to buy it. But I don't give a shit.
so do you not, so you've read Fahrenheit 451, I
I
assume?
haven't, unfortunately. Is that the
Okay,
book
you
burning
should.
one? Okay, yeah.
It is the book burning
Yeah.
one, yes.
Yeah.
And it isn't um Huxley does a really good job. I'm sorry, not Ray
Yeah.
Bradbury.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Hu- Huxley and Bradbury are I don't know, they're two sides of the same coin,
Just Brave New
perhaps.
World and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So Bradbury, when he wrote it, he didn't just build a very simplistic world in which you live in a world and people burn books and that's it. You know, he told a more complex story than that.
Yeah.
And my argument, and I don't think it's a very difficult ask for you to follow along intellectually with this,
Yeah.
is that we're at the precipice of that sort of society. And you can either go two ways. You can find the acts of evil, racism, bigotry lying dormant within our society and root them out and create a beautiful, flourishing, egalitarian society. Or you can create a golem in the interim that gets rid of the bad things that you don't want, but in doing so, you create this thing, this golem, that takes on a mind of its own
Yeah.
and doesn't know or doesn't have any mechanism by which it stops itself. And you very quickly go from cleansing our society of things that ought not be published to Fahrenheit 451. And I guess what I am arguing is the slippery slope philosophy, but I don't think that's a logical fallacy, at least
Okay.
not in this context.
Okay. Well, I hear you. I mean, it's hard to argue with like a hypothetical. Like cuz I hear those two options and I say like I don't want either of those options. Like and the golem, if I want to like put a name to it, I would say that golem in a good world is direct democracy. Like people literally being able to have a say in more aspects of their life, including their workplace, which people spend half their lives at and have almost no control over. And so I'm a big fan of direct democracy, which means like unions being a lot more powerful than they are in the US. And that's for the workplace. And then direct democracy with like interactions with media and stuff and like how people interact with their books. Like it's hard to say like what the right way to do that is besides Twitter and social media and everyone just coming out and saying, I agree with that academic article and so on, and other people saying, I disagree. Like I think it's safe to say we're both in like different echo chambers. Maybe not. I mean, maybe you're not in an echo chamber. I don't think of myself as being in one, but I think it's fair to say compared to each other, we each surround ourselves with probably more material that agrees with our views. For me, it's people saying, yeah, fucking get those books out of there. Who gives a shit? And for you, maybe it's more people saying, like, this is a bad sign of something that could happen and, like, this could get worse. That being said, so I think I'm saying that to say it's going to be hard for us to, like, speak to, like, what the majority thinks. Unless we're, like, using data. I don't think that that's something we can rely on. But sorry, I think I'm getting kind of, like, I'm speaking to a few different things at the same time. But I don't think that this is a sign of something worse, I guess is all I can say. Like I think people being able to speak up and say like that racist thing is like we don't need to print that and it's good to take it out of circulation. I don't think that leads to anything bad.
I think I'd like to point out a couple elements there that I don't think I think you're missing.
Yeah.
I said it earlier, but there isn't a clear standard. The standard continues to change. That is problematic. It's
Right.
not as though we have created through direct democracy or other means some sort of clearly defined standard based in our constitution that we can then take as a rubric, put it up against everything that's out there
Yeah.
and cleanse what doesn't belong.
Mm-hmm.
That is not what we're doing.
No.
The ruler that we're using is constantly changing size.
Yeah.
And that scares me. So using a tool that's not well understood by a group of people that is not well defined
Yeah.
doesn't go anywhere nice.
How else are we supposed to do it in a changing world? Like
Yeah, so I think I'm not sure that it's that important. I think that people dramatically overstate the harm being done by Dr. Seuss's less well-read, apologized for works.
I don't see people speaking about it doing a lot of harm, really. I just see people like, oh, they like just good, like they shouldn't publish it. I see people like not necessarily saying those books are doing a lot of harm. Just like, yeah, I can see why those are racist, and I can see why they shouldn't publish them. Yeah. But no, you're right. Like the standards do not stay still. And they're not fixed, and there's no rubric for them. And you mentioned the Constitution, which is a great example. How many amendments are there? A bunch. I haven't taken a civics class in a while. 27, 26.
27's as many as I know.
Okay, so there's a lot of amendments. So the Constitution is not fixed. It should be changed. It needs to be updated. I would say there need to be many more amendments. I think we need to renegotiate our relationship with the Constitution and get more comfortable rewriting it more frequently. Because to me, life is constantly changing. We need to constantly adapt to it. But this is the whole idea of like social construction, which I'm sure we'll come back to because it comes up a lot and stuff. Like, for something to be socially constructed means like everybody's interacting and creating meaning at like, and it's chaotic and so on, but it's like it's the only way we can do things. We would never be able to have a rule book, otherwise so many things would be bad. And you know, we do have rule books, we have laws and so on, and those change. And but yeah, I always think it needs to be changed. And in this situation, I don't see like it's hard to zoom in on the specific rule that's being broken and say like, yeah, like that'll be the thing. But
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry, no, keep
No,
going.
no, no.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
I guess I see people getting mad about the books being taken out of circulation much more than I see people getting mad like about the harm those books could do if they stayed in circulation, if that makes sense. Which is to say, it feels like a reaction to a step forward that society took, and the step forward doesn't matter that much and is relatively small, but the reaction is very loud. If that makes sense, or
perhaps then I chose a bad example of something that wasn't doing much harm.
Okay.
The correction to it didn't do much harm.
Right.
But the focus then is on the backlash to the backlash. And I think that there's plenty of other examples that I could levy that would be more convincing to your perspective.
Are you thinking of one? Because I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I'm happy.
No, put me on the spot. That's what we're doing. So I think I'd like to at least give an example of something that I think was a very clear, excellent example of social construction that is necessary. Because I'm not necessarily arguing against the mechanism of progress.
Right.
I think that's how you make progress.
Yeah.
I'm attacking specific elements of it.
Yeah.
The civil rights movement would be an excellent example of something that was, I think, originally held by a minority of people, and then slowly that grew through various different forms of pacifist activism.
Yeah.
And an excellent cause was fought for. Equality of all men and women under law.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I think we can all agree that that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And the mechanism by which it happened was a good one, as in MLK Jr. and various activists that worked with him employed what I think were just principles in order to get something just done.
Sure.
So I think that would be maybe a gold standard of the right way to go about doing things.
Sure. Yeah.
But if you brought him into today's world, MLK Jr. wasn't so great with women. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
Yeah. He had shitty characteristics. Yeah.
So are we?
So did Gandhi and Karl Marx and yeah.
So did many figures throughout history.
Yeah.
But it's a far cry from. Perhaps this is the example that I need to give to you to convince you. If we start vilifying, for example, some of our forefathers from the 18th century, our founding fathers of the United States, you'll find that many of them held slaves.
Yeah.
Does it invalidate the principles that they espouse?
No. Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't think so. But this mob mentality doesn't think logically about these things. It doesn't fight with nuance. It just fights anything that looks, smells, or feels like it could be a threat to the current ideology. And that leads to Abraham Lincoln's statue getting torn down.
Do you know what that statue was of? I mean, did you see it?
No, I didn't actually.
You gotta look up a picture of it right now. Because I thought I saw like a PragerU video where they talked about it, and I thought they must be lying. No one took down a Lincoln statue. And then I looked it up, and there's like a little black boy. That's like looking at him like a god or some shit. It's like not beautiful. But
No,
yeah,
I
I'd love.
didn't actually look at
No,
it.
no, no, no. But all your points. I mean, I totally understand where you're coming from. It doesn't hinge on that Lincoln statue, but it's worth checking out.
I
But
see it. I see
yeah,
it.
yeah.
There's like this paternalistic, like, go free my child kind of
so
vibe.
but
I get it.
I totally get your points, and it was making me think of the statues even before you mentioned that, like, because I think that's a great sort of like thing to say. So vilifying, this idea that people are like vilifying them and like throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Hmm.
Like, does it discount everything the founding fathers thought and wrote, that they owned slaves? No, that's ridiculous. And anyone who says that is exaggerating. But it points to hypocrisy. I mean, it points to hypocrisy. You cannot say all men are created equal and own men and torture them, like, and keep them in chains and own their children and torture them. Like, that's a hypocrisy. So it sheds light on the founding of America in a way that I think adds complexity and is important. I think it's important to understand that hypocrisy. I think hypocrisy is somewhat universal. I think we all have things we might be hypocritical about. Doesn't necessarily matter. But I don't think they need to be vilified. I don't think anyone necessarily needs to be vilified. But I think that, like, keeping their statues up is also very unnecessary. Like, there's a lot in between vilifying them and keeping their statues up. I think their statues should come down. I mean, I don't care at all. I don't want to just come back to like what I care and don't care about, because that's not really important. But like, there are so many people we could put statues up of, and I don't see any reason why it needs to be people who owned slaves. There are people who represent those good values that the founding fathers did, or whatever, General Lee, these other people they had statues of. I'm sure he had good qualities, but we can like put up statues that represent something like just like almost fully unobjectionable.
Give me an example of something that's pure.
I mean, I fucking hate statues. I don't think we need statues. But
I
like
don't think there's an example. I don't think one exists of something that's actually ideologically and morally uncompromisable.
I don't know. I mean, like I would be a fan of putting statues up of people who just like fought for civil rights and maybe didn't I don't know, have the negative traits Martin Luther King had. I don't know.
Can you name one?
I mean, I would be a fan of putting up a statue of Martin Luther King. Actually, this is an important point to make. I would be a fan of putting up many statues of Martin Luther King because,
You beat women.
yeah,
Every time I look at it, I think about being beaten by my husband.
I think,
Could any woman say, and
yeah,
have a leg to stand on?
yeah, I would say first, I think that Martin Luther King represents so much, and that's an extremely small percent of it. Whereas I think it's a little more reasonable to say that the founding fathers, it was like not as small of a percent, but that's not an important argument. I think the more important argument to make, and this is what I believe, I would say put up thousands of statues of Martin Luther King, and if women and allies of women come out and protest them, great, take them down. I literally don't care.
Creates jobs. It's a good idea.
No, but like it's the right to protest. I do think people, yeah.
Well, okay, so perhaps I chose an imperfect example, but George Washington certainly would be, I would say, a more perfect example. The idea of a statue perhaps is worth discussing.
Yeah.
It's a symbol.
Yeah.
It isn't an admiration of every quality that human being represented, nor is it condemnation of everything that person participated in during their lifetime.
Yeah.
But there's this sensibility in order for, if I were one of the people that tore down George Washington's statue, there's this sense I would have to have of myself, of moral superiority, that I would know what was best based on the current time I'm in. And there's a good chance that person also eats meat.
Yeah.
And 300 years from now, I'm pretty darn sure that they're going to look back on those protesters and say, that disgusting piece of shit, they were eating meat and contributing to the torture of animals. Everything they did was wrong. There's this ever sliding scale of righteousness as we figure out more about what we think is and isn't right.
Yeah.
And erasing what was done in the past because of the context that it existed in is a mistake.
Okay. I hear you. I think yeah, it's a statue. A statue represents a lot, and it definitely doesn't represent everything about a person. But like I think it comes back to the same thing with like this Vogue editor. Like, who are we mad at? Are we mad at the people protesting, or are we mad at the city for like caving or like agreeing to take down the statues, or like, and if you're yeah, who are you mad at? I guess in the
All
specific,
of the above. And mad probably is a low resolution way to describe
who
it.
do you hold responsible? You know,
Ultimately, it's the decision of whoever operates within the bounds of the law to or breaks the law in order to actually do the thing that makes the change. So in the example of firing the teen Vogue editor,
hmm
it's Teen Vogue. It's on them. In
okay,
the example of the statues being taken down, it's either the protesters that go and vandalize in the middle of the night, or
okay.
it's the city that chooses to remove them.
Okay, so hypothetically, if we go back to the majority and minority thing, if we can say it was a majority of people in a given city who wanted a statue taken down, and the city agrees to take it down, do you think something wrong has been done?
Depends on which statue it is.
Let's say that Lincoln one. Like,
Um,
let's say like
Let
the
me think for
majority
a
of people
second.
yeah, the people say, "Hey, I want it down." They protest for weeks, and the city is like, "God damn it, this looks horrible for us." Or like we agree.
I'm really not sure that that's a problem. Perhaps I would need to think about it if I were really trying
Sure,
to be rigorous
sure,
about
yeah,
some sort of element of that that could be problematic.
yeah.
But on its face, that doesn't seem like a problem to me. That seems like peaceful democracy working well.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I certainly agree because I think, I know that you are a fan of free speech and people being able to speak their mind. So I always come back to this like, well, aren't the protesters just speaking their mind? And then if we're mad at the city, then we're like almost anti-democracy in a sense. It's like, well, the city shouldn't listen to their people. Their people are irrational and they don't know what they're talking about or something. But like, okay. Well, I wanted to mention one thing which has to do with this and also ties in with BDS, which you mentioned on your list of discussion topics, which I found out is not BDSM. So I did a lot of research into BDSM, and then I had to switch. No, I'm just kidding. But
Yeah, I know. You wouldn't have had to research that. You're an
I know
expert.
all about that. But
May I say one last
yeah,
thing
yeah, yeah,
before we
yeah.
move
Sorry, yeah,
on?
and it's not going to change the subject dramatically, but yeah,
If we had only gone by the democratically elected majority,
yeah.
slavery would still be going on today.
Right, right. So people need to like protest, or like, what do you mean exactly? Or
Well, I'm saying that we need to apply certain standards beyond just did the majority vote for it.
oh
So
yeah,
what you said in your example of taking down the Lincoln statue were not just a hypothetical, but
yeah,
peacefully protested and said we would like this down, and there were 60% of the population doing that.
yeah.
And they listened, they being the government. You'd have, I guess, successful democracy working. But if you were to apply that to slavery and the civil rights movement, you wouldn't have had that change.
I think
So there needs to
yeah.
be a more complex analysis than this minority is really loud. We ought to cave to their will. This majority says that we should do it. We need to cave to their will. There needs to be a process by which both opinions are considered and
Mhm.
applied through the framework of our three branched government.
What if that process isn't done or like isn't done properly? I mean, what if
That,
the well then people have to come out and protest. I think the point you're making about the fact that a majority is often for very bad things, right? I think that's a very good point. And I think that speaks to why loud minorities are good. Like loud minorities are necessary because there's a lot of people who just I don't know, they're just going about their lives. They don't have time to care about all this shit.
they're good to consider. They're not good to appease ad nauseum.
I
And
think
I'm not
yeah.
confident that there's an adult in the room that would say, enough is enough. I get how you feel. I hear you,
Yeah.
but no.
I know Teen Vogue is a magazine for kids, but like it's run by adults, obviously, and like come on, like they're not sitting in their like like executive office tossing like a talking stick and like holding hands. They're like making a decision in a boardroom saying like, yeah, this looks really bad. We need to do the quickest thing possible. Like they are adults making adult decisions based on their interests.
Based on their interests, I think is probably the area that I would focus on. We've talked about some examples that I think you've done a really good job defending the legitimacy of.
Thanks.
So like in the Dr. Seuss example, I think you've given good examples of why like we maybe do need to cleanse ourselves of that. There's a plethora of examples where we are canceling, if you'll let me use that
sure.
buzzword, things that shouldn't be canceled at all. And it's because people and corporations are scared. And when you have a societal, when you have fear running decisions, you're gonna make some really bad mistakes as a society.
So can you give an example of any of these things that shouldn't be canceled? I mean,
yeah, It's Always Sunny blackface episodes, the Community episode where he's a dark elf. Like there's no reason for those to be canceled other than those companies are scared and they don't want their bottom line to be affected.
I agree. I totally agree that those episodes do not need to be taken down and like
you cut out for a second. You totally agree that what?
Yeah, am I coming through? Or
yeah, you're good. Okay. But
yeah, I mean I agree. What was the Community and It's Always Sunny? I don't remember exactly.
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia removed 5 episodes that incorporate blackface of a kind.
Yeah.
And Community removed an episode, or I should say Netflix, but FX and Netflix respectively, an episode where Chang, an already racist, hilarious, out there character, dressed up for Dungeons and Dragons in Our Girlfriend.
It's stupid. It's stupid to do that.
It's worse than stupid, though. Stupid is letting them get off easy.
You think it's harmful?
I think it is very harmful. Yes, I do.
I think you need to make an argument about it being harmful without saying it's going to lead to something harmful.
I don't think so. I don't think I have to just say that the content they removed is now depriving society of intense value. I don't think I have to say that.
But you need to draw like some clear line between how this is going to. So, do you see a future where like nothing even remotely offensive is possible on TV? I mean,
I see a parallel to where there is a Joseph Goebbels or Soviet era type comparison where there is an appointed government body that decides what is and isn't acceptable and goes way farther than the current FCC does.
Okay, but that's a huge jump from where we are. Because
I don't think you're correct about that.
You made a jump from private industry to the government.
Yeah. So look at I agree with you.
Yeah.
But let's if you're okay spending more time here, I'd like to.
I mean, I honestly have nothing else to do. If we talk for like 3 hours, I don't care. Yeah. Can I refill my coffee? I like getting jacked up on coffee. Okay, one sec.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, you didn't say you didn't ban performance enhancing drugs, so I feel like I can drink coffee.
Yeah, you need them to be really honest. This would be too boring. It'd be like talking to that plant behind you,
which is like almost dead, basically.
That's my point. So let's get to the root of it. Where do these ideologies come from? I think that you can pinpoint a lot of these overreactive ideologies against snuffing out the slightest scent of racism and its adjacents.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can tie it to collegiate level academia.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's pretty clearly coming from a small few hundred, maybe a few thousand faculty at colleges across the United States that are purveying this ideology and exporting it full scale. And I think that is more dangerous than most people recognize. And so I guess I see that as the nexus of where this ideology comes from. And so I see them as like a socially woke factory, if you will,
Yeah, I
generating
get you.
new woke ideas. So like I read the paper written by the two people that were condemning Dr. Seuss because
Yeah.
I like to go to the source material.
Yeah, yeah, good. I was gonna
What are
ask
the
if you.
people most against this saying? Because typically society will take elements from that. And
Yeah.
maybe I ask for full abolition of slavery. All
Right.
right, maybe you get something in between. Maybe you get Jim Crow for now or
Right,
something like
right.
that. And it's not a great example, but
Sure, sure. I get what you mean.
um,
I get what you mean.
yeah. So I wanted to look at like the source because I see that as where everything or in this vein is coming from,
Yeah.
and it's very troubling at the very
Okay.
least. Um, full out unapologetically Marxist or communist um, individuals stumping for communism, being
Okay.
romantic or romanticizing and apologetic for Soviet Russia without acknowledging the Gulag Archipelago by Solzhenitsyn.
Okay. I think we're getting into other stuff there. No, seriously. No, I'm
We
happy.
are.
I'm happy to like talk about this, but like, okay. So this is how you're drawing the connection between like a private company and like the government. You're saying like these ideas maybe they start in academia and they spread into like corporate culture maybe, and then maybe they spread to the government at the same time, or there's this diffusion of these radical ideas, and you're saying the radical ideas are Marxist. There's really nothing remotely Marxist about anything we've really talked about, as far as I
That's
understand.
true.
Yeah,
That's
but
true.
like Marx has didn't give a fuck about like media portraying anyone or anything like that. But like, okay, but the I guess the question I have is like, how does like if this is over the top, which I agree with you that taking these episodes down is relatively unnecessary. Like I didn't see all the It's Always Sunny, but yeah, the Community one, like I think it's silly. Um, but silly is not saying enough. I understand from your perspective, but like, how does that? So that leads to a world where not just like anything offensive is banned, which I find very hard to believe because I think there's a deep craving for offensive humor. I think we all like offensive humor, even people who are woke. I think it just has to be of a certain kind and stuff like that. But anyways, um, you're saying it not just leads to like really boring TV and so on, but it leads to censorship and like a totalitarian sort of like
Yes, I do.
yeah, you have to be. I don't know. I don't see any reason to make that jump. I really don't. I see it as a corporation being woke and being over the top and not necessarily being in line with what people want. I didn't hear
So
people protesting to take those episodes down. If they were, like, I didn't hear it. I don't know.
I didn't either. So
Yeah.
you're making a fair argument, I think, that I'm trying to prove too much. I'm trying to say
Right.
I'm trying to invoke slippery slope too soon,
Okay.
basically. May I ask you two questions?
Yeah.
At what point will you agree with me? What needs to happen in order for you to think like I do about
Yeah.
this will go too far? And secondly, what is the end point if not what I said? So, where will this ideology say, our work here is done? We live in an egalitarian society. We're good to go. There's
Mhm.
no need for this anymore.
It's not happening. It's not happening. Like the society is not egalitarian. Taking episodes down from Netflix is not a substantial material thing at all. Makes no positive impact. For any serious positive impact to be done with racism and systemic racism, institutional racism, it goes so beyond Netflix. It's not even obviously it's not even funny. Like there needs to be like radical changes in the justice system and in probably the school system and in the way we understand like race relations and the history of the country for there to be anything like resembling like equity in my view. So like to answer that question, like I don't it's not like I guess I take issue with the question because I don't think we're on the path to an egalitarian society through these measures. I don't think that. I think we're on the path of corporations trying to look woke to help their bottom line. And that's how I see it. And I see that as me applying like Occam's razor and going with like the simplest possible explanation for something. The most simple reasonable explanation. Your first question, what would have to happen for me to agree with you that this is the case? It's a tough, it's a good, really good question. And it's a tough one to answer. Like, I guess, like for me, so what would have to happen for me to like worry about this? I mean, I'll maybe this is a slight not answering the question, but one of my favorite bands, Animal Collective. But I've loved them since I was a teenager. They helped me grow into like an adult. They're really one of the most important parts of my musical life. When Black Lives Matter was protesting, I think it was last year, and people were making changes to their to things like this, changing a Netflix show or something like that. Animal Collective, on their own volition, changed one of their old albums that used to be called "Here Comes the Indian" to something else, and they changed the cover because it maybe had a not so sensitive portrayal of like a Native American. They were never racist. I mean, they weren't like the music wasn't racist, but they felt like, look, it like sort of adds into this like savage Indian sort of like stereotype, and so we're changing it. No harm done. We're changing our album. I saw that and I thought, that's like, I guess all this stuff probably falls into like affirmative action to a certain extent because you're like doing something affirmatively to try to rectify things. I thought, look, that doesn't make any big change. They changed their album. It doesn't help the world be more equal. It just makes one tiny teardrop of like slightly less misrepresentation of a marginalized group who I think we can both agree has gotten the short end of the stick historically. So I don't see it as moving in the right direction, but I don't see it as going in such a wrong direction as you seem to be saying. And it's really hard to say what would need to happen for me to see it as going in the wrong direction because there are so many things right now that I think are going in dramatically the wrong direction. But this like government censorship of stuff, I don't see it as a huge problem. And I would like to mention actually another sort of deplatforming example that I think I'm really curious about your take on. But you can obviously respond. I just said a bunch of stuff, but yeah.
No, I think perhaps maybe we've exhausted the depths by which we can explore this topic. I think maybe I could have done a better job coming up with examples that you would have found more compelling. I don't think I brought examples to the table that you would have listened to and gone, actually, maybe that could be harmful. I think I brought examples where you went, either there was something to it and it was legitimized, or who really cares? Like, you're making a big deal out of it, Josh.
First of all, I'm having a great time, and we can do this again.
Me too.
Yeah, we can do this again anytime, have a part 2 or anything. And if you think of examples, let me know. But I don't want it to be like I'm just, playing whack-a-mole with examples. I do think I have principles. Maybe it's hard to like articulate about, but I do feel like I have principles. And I'm not like supporting the free market. I'm just saying like we live in a society where, where like the companies do have a lot of power. And I think it's a mistake to say, well, these companies having power is going to lead to the government having power, because I have problems how the government has power and companies have power, but I don't know where. Let me present my example. I'm really curious. So the guy who got fired from is it Current Affairs or something? He got fired for posting things criticizing Israel. Did you hear about that like a month ago or 2 months ago?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Okay, maybe I can tell you the name. Hold on. Fired criticizing Israel.
Killer whales are the apex predator of the ocean.
That's what it is. That's the article I was talking about.
No. I'm just giving our viewers something in the interim to think about.
Okay, Nathan J. Robinson. He was fired from. Did you hear about him or?
No, I mean I Google did apparently.
Okay, yeah. Look him up. I was definitely curious what you would think, because, like, I don't know all the details. I get the sense he criticized Israel for things that were, as far as I could understand, not in any way anti-Semitic or anything like that. And he lost his job. So I wanted to ask your take on that, because it's very similar to these other situations, except that he's losing his job for something I'm guessing you don't support. Like, I'm guessing you wouldn't agree with the criticisms he made of Israel. I could be wrong, but the way you put BDS on the rubric made me think you think it's not maybe a great thing. I don't know. Like, so I don't want to assume your beliefs or anything, and yeah, I know I'm just dropping this case on you, but like, I guess what I'm wondering is like, do you feel differently about someone losing their job when you like totally agree? Does the moral argument of like, yeah, they did something wrong factor in?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like the underlying content, does that really factor in? So whether
Yeah.
it's Always Sunny using blackface or
Yeah.
if it's a more intellectual criticism of foreign policy, does that make a difference for
And
me?
maybe I'd compare this more so just to the Vogue thing because it's more like directly symmetrical to that thing. And not that you support what she said about Asian people or anything like that. But yeah, like in a situation like this, in a situation like this, when if someone's, yeah, should he have been fired from his job, or do you blame? Who do you blame? Do you blame well, we talk about the loud minorities. The uh, the Israel lobby is like the second biggest lobbying group in the United States. So they have a huge influence on public discourse, and they do have power. I mean, the Israeli lobby has a huge amount of power. I don't know exactly how this guy got fired, but I'm guessing that the powerful people called up the magazine and said that's unacceptable. I could be wrong, but it's a case where the loud minority is not social justice warriors. I guess that's my point. There are situations where the loud minority is conservative people or more traditional minded people, and they're having a more woke person canceled just for criticizing their interests. I don't know if I'm being clear about what I'm asking you. I guess, yeah. I guess I wanted to pose it to see if you also would stand up for like someone's right to not be fired by their organization if they were saying things you disagree with, like dramatically disagree with.
Yeah, so I think the underlying content is not as important to me. I don't think it's as important to me as you may have thought. Not to assign any viewpoints to you, but
yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
So it bothers me still that someone would be fired for speaking out like this if there is a direct correlation there.
Right.
Or a causal link, I should say.
Right.
It's not as troubling, I think, as trying to protect people's feelings, but it's perhaps more troubling in a different sense.
Isn't this to protect the feelings of people who don't want Israel criticized?
If what you say is happening is actually happening, no, it's for Israel to protect its borders ultimately through securing financial and military protection and support through the United States.
So where's the line there? Like, is any criticism allowed?
So absolutely, criticism is allowed. I'm saying that the person who got canceled, Nathan, if that's why, shouldn't have been.
Right.
I think, especially, I mean, what are the goals of The Guardian, which he was working for? Like, what are their stated goals? You're a news organization.
Right.
You should be willing to invite criticism of your editors.
Right. Right. Fair enough. Yeah. Yeah, I guess. So you would say, like, would you say that was like an overreaction to the same extent, like assuming the facts as I gave them are relatively
Assuming the facts as you gave them, yes.
Yeah.
Or to a similar extent.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't assume how you felt in one way or the other. I assume that your view is like free speech is important and so on. I just wanted to throw a challenge there when the speech
above pretty much all else, I think. Yeah.
So are people free to like go out and like demand other people be killed?
Okay. So is free speech an unlimited right? Is essentially what you asked me.
Yeah, because legally it's not. I mean, obviously, but yeah, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, sorry, just having a little bit of audio issue. Or there we go,
No,
video
that's fine.
issues.
Yeah.
So free speech is not an absolute right. There really are no absolute rights.
Yeah.
And I don't think it needs to be. But I think that the current standard that we have for inciting violence is a good one.
Yeah. Yeah. So people shouldn't be allowed to incite violence, you mean?
Um, as it's currently defined, I think the Supreme Court arrived at a good, clear standard.
Okay.
Where I conduct my, if I put speech out there where I believe the standard is present in imminent, or imminent is one element of it. I don't remember the other,
Okay.
but if I know that there is a reasonable probability that based on my speech there's going to be violence committed as a direct result of it, I'm not allowed to say that.
Yeah.
And I think that's completely fair.
Yeah. So you're not for protecting someone's like emotional feelings at the expense of free speech, but you're for
Not a
protecting.
chance.
Yeah, of course, but you're for protecting people's literal safety.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
if there were a person on the street that you saw putting his fist into the air and saying, "Let's kill all the people down the street,"
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that speech should be prosecutable under law.
So what about someone going on a public platform and dehumanizing people? Like saying like uh Jews are scum, you know. They're filth, and even using like language from say like very loaded language like they're pestilence or something like that, or should that be allowed?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm probably not going to ask that guy over for dinner anytime soon,
So
but yeah, I think that absolutely should be protected under the First Amendment.
okay. So just, and I know this isn't an accurate representation of anyone that this has happened to this extreme example, but so if that person was invited to speak at your college and everybody protested, and then your college said, "Oh wow, yeah, we didn't realize that was his message. Maybe we'll not have him over to speak here." What would you think? Would you think that the protesters were canceling free speech, or
No, I think that if in this specific example,
yeah,
no,
like
I think that's a legitimate protest against in someone who you don't want to give a platform to.
okay, so there is speech that you would say is free and allowed, and yet should also or can also morally be deplatformed.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. I
I,
mean, certainly that makes
I
sense. Yeah.
yeah,
So then,
that's how I feel about it.
the real, I guess, the only big difference or a small difference would be where that line is, because obviously Milo Yiannopoulos and whatever, they're not. He's not going out saying literally the Jews should be gassed. He's just saying like uh, a lot of other shit that's like certainly across my line. But
He's
like,
not inciting violence though.
okay, but you said that that's not inciting violence. I'm sorry, like you said like there's speech that's not inciting violence that should still or can still morally be deplatformed. So
Okay. I said that the people who are bringing about the deplatforming have a
yeah,
moral leg to stand on because there's a clear value
yeah,
of, I don't know, respect for all human life that
okay,
isn't
yeah,
being admired in
okay,
that
yeah,
space. And so I think that in the specific example you gave at a private university,
yeah,
if they don't want that person to come give the commencement speech, more power to them. I don't think
yeah,
that person should come give the commencement speech.
okay,
At a public university, if they want to speak out on the front lawn and they went through the proper hoops to get a permit, they shouldn't be denied that permit.
okay. So so that's an interesting private-public distinction. Because yeah, I guess I'm not even thinking about that so much. Like I'm just thinking, yeah, the moral leg to stand on of the people protesting. You do think people have like a legitimate moral reason to be protesting someone's free speech, even when that free speech is legally allowed, and
Absolutely.
but you also wouldn't view it as canceling if the school caved to the students protesting someone, for instance, who was dehumanizing people.
In this particular instance, I
Yeah.
agree with you. I mean, the
Yeah.
specific language you used
Yeah.
around Jewish people being a pestilence plaguing the human population.
And you said general human decency or like human care, like whatever, or I forget your way of like
No, I think I said respect for basic human rights.
Yeah, respect for basic human rights. So it's not just like incitement of violence. Like if someone was disrespecting like vast majorities of people or like marginalized people who are at risk or something like that, then it wouldn't be canceling for an institution to agree with the protesters and not let them
I
speak.
think you just gave a little slip of the tongue, or maybe that's not the right
Yeah, let me
phrase.
know. Yeah.
You slipped something in there that I didn't agree with. I was
Yeah,
about
let me
to
know.
agree.
I'm not trying to do that. Yeah.
So, like, marginalizing at-risk people does not meet that standard for me.
But that's fine. I'm just trying to say like there is a standard short of
Yeah.
the legal definition of free speech that you would not blame, you would not call it canceling to limit a person speaking something short of inciting violence. Uh, and so you have a different, like you have a standard, a part of the range of speech that you would say is not
Yeah.
legally incitement, but it also is perfectly reasonable and moral for people to deplatform them. Is that accurate or?
I think that that is. Think that that's a good summary of my beliefs.
Okay.
Yeah. Where I think we'd probably diverge, the more interesting thing to talk
Yeah,
about,
where that
is
line?
where that's being applied
Yeah,
and what the definition is. Like, what that line is different for every human being.
yeah.
And I think that that line is being drawn far too soon
Okay,
among various public personas.
okay.
There's
Yeah.
there's so much to talk about here, including like um, publisher versus platform, the
Hmm.
status of Facebook, YouTube, etc., where those fit in, internet service providers,
Hmm.
um, Amazon Web Services. There's a lot to talk about in this space.
I
This
mean,
is a
I could
deep
be wrong.
question.
I could be wrong if we talked about it, and maybe I would find out I don't think this, but I sort of feel like all those things I don't care the distinction. Like for me, it would generally be the same principle. It's like people are protesting an institution or a system, giving a platform to some person, whether it's a book, whether it's whatever, or whether it's someone having their stuff sold, and the institution reacts based on a mix of their own interest. Yeah, based on their own interest, basically. Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
dissect one of the examples because that's the best way to do it.
Sweet.
Amazon
Yeah.
Web Services. You familiar
Yeah.
with what they are, what they provide?
I hate them. Yeah. Their
Okay,
commercials are everywhere. I'm like, shut up. I hate you guys. But okay, yes.
that's your first mistake is watching commercials. But Amazon Web Services provides a gigantic plurality of the infrastructure, if not a simple majority, for cloud-based computing, among other things,
Yeah.
including web hosting in the United States and probably worldwide, though I'm less sure about that.
Sure.
One of the sites that they host is called Parler, or rather, they
Yeah.
used to.
I'm familiar. Yeah.
Another one that they host is called Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't think that standard is being evenly applied. I think that there is a deeper political ideology that is driving this decision. I don't think it's a consistent standard like the one that you put out there and I agreed to.
I can agree that it's a different standard. I mean, surely you don't think AWS is like run by leftists. I mean, right? Like,
No, I do.
where do you get that assumption?
How about the Washington Post?
I mean, dude, like it's a liberal newspaper. It's not like leftist. Like they like denigrate Bernie Sanders. Like the whole election, they were denigrating Bernie Sanders, who's the only like one of the only slightly left wing candidates. Like
Denigrating Bernie Sanders is one of the most leftist things you can do.
okay, but the news no, dude. Like even all the leftists I follow, like they'll make fun of him here and there, but like there's a respect for Bernie Sanders. He's one of the only politicians who has made it his career to like fight for slightly left wing values or dramatically left wing values.
For what it's worth, I also respect Bernie Sanders,
Yeah.
even if I disagree with, I think, every single one of his policy proposals.
He seems like a down to earth guy. He seems like a chill guy. But like yeah, it's but no, seriously, I don't think it's fair to say Washington Post is a leftist organization at all. I think you could look at a million articles they've published that fight against left wing values. Like seriously, like and being owned by the second richest man in the world does not mean they're likely to be left wing.
I don't agree with you, but I don't feel the need to debate on the
Okay,
Washington Post's
okay.
political leaning.
So I don't think it's fair to assume, based on the Washington Post, that Amazon is run by leftists.
I would like to retract what I said before.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think that Amazon Web Services is run by people who are explicitly leftists.
Yeah.
I do think that deep leftist ideology has infiltrated that organization.
I wish.
Not necessarily through their employees.
Yeah.
But through a public perception of that ideology. So similar to some of the other examples we already talked about, I think that AWS, Amazon Web Services, has a desire or a propensity to kowtow to this sort of pre-cancel culture ideology.
Can I stop you for 1 sec? I want to change desire. I would say they have an incentive. I think it's more accurate to say they have an incentive. And I think that's just, you're giving it like, I think that gives it a material like aspect to just say they have a financial and media incentive, or like, public image incentive.
I don't think we can have a good conversation about this without discussing where that incentive comes from.
Okay, and you're saying it comes from like people's demand, right? Or like the public, like whether it's a minority public, like people yelling at them essentially.
So it's fear. Yeah. It's fear driven by demand, I would say.
Okay, the fear part is like a jump though. I don't know what to do with that because I don't know.
Profit.
Fear of what? Of losing profit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well that I can agree with. Okay, so they're afraid
if I'm a CEO, for example, and I lose profit in a quarter where I wasn't supposed to, I'm not going to be able to do that for very long before the board of directors kicks me out and I'm looking for a job. So
I totally agree. I didn't realize that's what you meant. Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
I thought you meant some other type of fear or something like that. Okay, yeah.
They're losing financial security, for lack of a better word.
So to get to the Parler, so they're not, they're obviously treating Parler different from Facebook. It is different. It's a different website. It has different rules. It caters to a different population and stuff. But does that mean a different free speech standard should be used? Of course not. Like they should get the right to, speak freely. So the crackdown on Parler was enormous, obviously, and very abrupt. They had a lot of incitement of violence on their platform. Are you aware of that? Or because basically Amazon, I read the letter they wrote to them. They said you didn't follow our rules. You didn't take down the incitement of violence. Does Facebook have a lot of incitement of violence they don't take down? Probably. Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. Yeah, probably. So I think it's fair to maybe assume that Facebook does more than Parler. Not that that's like the point of the argument, but I think it's probably fair to say they have some better, and I could criticize Facebook till the end of the day, but I think it's fair to maybe say they have some better ways. I don't think Parler was.
So is AWS's standard you have to give it a good old college try for us to not get rid of you?
Say it again. What do you mean?
So the bifurcation that you drew between Facebook and Parler is that Parler was leaving up incitements of violence, whereas Facebook at least tries to take them down.
It's all about it's an effort. It's an effort trophy. No, I do. Yeah, I do think making actual efforts as far as a web service hoster, whatever, they want to see some efforts. Certainly the lack of any efforts indicates a lack of caring about this relatively critical issue, incitement of violence. No, I don't think it's all about making efforts, but I think Facebook is probably better at pretending they're making efforts. Parler, I think it was their thing that they're like, we don't give a fuck, like do whatever you want. And I've seen Parler snapshots. There were a lot of extremely violent posts, especially around January 6th and before and after and so on. But all of this is just to say that AWS is doing something in its own financial interest because everybody got mad at Parler. I don't think it's a minority, but again, we could go back and forth on that. A lot of people on the internet were mad at Parler, so AWS said, oh, cool, we can fix that. Let's get everybody feel good about us for a second, and we'll be the good guys. So I guess. Wait, why did you bring up this example? I feel like I might be going off track of the point of why you brought up this specific example.
You were talking about free speech, and we were defining what a good standard to apply is, right? We agreed that there is no free speech.
Yeah.
And you asked me, would you agree that there's a point at which it's legitimate to deplatform?
Yeah.
And I said,
yeah.
But in this particular example, it is not being applied as a fair standard, as an easy to follow fair standard. I think it's being applied in accordance with political ideology.
I mean, I saw it. I read the letter that Amazon wrote to Parler, and they literally said like, "We warned you on this day, and you didn't take action." And like, it could be a different standard, but I think it's really a jump to say that there's a political ideology here. I mean, I think ideology is everywhere, but I think it is a bit of a jump. I don't think you necessarily have evidence for it being like a political ideology, and that's why I went to the you think they're a leftist and so on like thing.
One would think that if the goal that I had, which supposedly Amazon Web Services does, is to minimize harm done through incitement of violence, they would go for Facebook first, because that's where the majority of those posts are.
Their goal is not that. Of course.
I know.
Yes, of course. Of course. They don't go for Facebook because they probably make a shitload of money with Facebook.
Yeah.
And it is a cost-benefit analysis. So I think that undercuts the political ideology point. Because I really think they're doing it based on how much do we get, how much do we lose. And Parler was like, oh, cool. Like, they did it like right at the best time, right? Like right after January 6th, everybody's super mad at Parler. Great. Really low cost, high benefit. So I don't think it's fair to jump to political ideology. Maybe people love to say they're using Occam's razor when they're not, but I feel like I'm using Occam's razor, and I'm saying like, I think the simplest explanation is they're doing it for their financial incentive. Is it unfair and uneven? Maybe. I think a lot more should be done to rein in Facebook. I mean, but I don't think it's fair to say there's like a leftist SJW political ideology like permeating AWS. Like, I think it's just fair to say they're trying to make the dollars. They want the dollars, and they want more of them. Can I pee really quick? I have to. Right. Yeah, I don't know, man. I in general, like, I just think it's a bit of a jump to say it's an ideology. Do you see where I'm coming from? Like, that it seems more simple to just say it's a financial incentive, or you might not agree, but I guess.
Yeah, so I know it may seem like, since this is the first time I'm introducing it's bullshit, but I don't believe in Occam's razor. I think it's a stupid thing to use.
Really?
Yeah, I think Occam's razor is completely overused, inappropriately applied. It doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Do you see how?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
And I should say it's not the simplest. I want the explanation that pulls in the least number of assumptions.
That's what Occam's razor is.
Yeah.
But it's still bullshit.
Do you see how? Okay.
I think your point was a good one. I just don't think invoking Occam's razor was the thing that I was really contesting.
That's interesting. I've never heard that perspective, but do you see how the point I was making could be called Occam's razor? Like,
I do.
Okay. So I think of it as forgetting the name Occam's razor. Like, when I'm trying to describe a phenomenon, I just want to do it with the least assumptions possible. If I'm good at one thing, it's like identifying assumptions in myself and other people, just from studying philosophy and stuff like that. And like, I'm always just wanting to take in few assumptions. So I don't see a political ideology. If there was like evidence that AWS was like doing leftist stuff, I mean, I would be extremely pumped. But like, I would maybe give more credence to like, that's why they did it. But to me, it's just like, they're a huge company. They obviously want to make money. Why do we need to postulate that there's an ideology going on there? Yeah. But capitalism's an ideology, so I guess, yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Shall we talk about gun laws?
Let's talk about Jordan Peterson, honestly, because we're probably going to have a lot to say, and ideology is a good jump. Because one thing I wanted to ask you is, do you view him as not having an ideology? Because I feel like, tries to portray himself as like identifying other ideologies and not having one. Does he acknowledge?
He has an ideology.
He does. Okay. Yeah. I just wasn't sure if that's something people like acknowledge.
And he admits that he's a clinical psychologist and that he does not pretend to be purveying a full, complete truth of the ideas that he's toying with. He is popularizing them and is doing his best job to, portray them. But he admits openly that he doesn't think he's doing a perfect job and is not a perfect scholar on these topics.
That's great, yeah. But yeah, but you do. So do you feel like you have an ideology? I'm just trying to understand the way you.
Many
Okay.
ideologies.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Good. Because some people I feel like use it as this like bad word and are like, other people have ideologies. I have like knowledge or something, and it's like, okay,
I
I just
think there are bad. I think some are
yeah,
better than others. There's a
sure,
hierarchy of them.
yeah, sure,
I try to subscribe to the good ones.
okay.
Just like a Pinterest board or something, you know?
So, what's I guess what I wanted to know is like how do you think Jordan Peterson like wants the world to work? I guess if that's a fair question.
Yeah.
Like
We'd all be parented by lobster daddies. If no, I'm
I
sorry, I couldn't
no, I
resist.
saw I was telling you I was watching someone analyze 12 Rules for Life. Apparently he makes some claim in there that lobsters after a fight like their brain melts and like regrows as like a submissive lobster if they lose the fight, like their brain melts and regrow. He like cites some like empirical thing about lobsters, but like he doesn't actually refer to any evidence of it and there's no proof that that happens with lobster brains. But
I don't know. I haven't read that. I haven't gotten there yet.
okay, whatever. Anyways, how does he? Is it fair to ask like, how does he want society to be structured? Because I feel like that's a fair question. I feel like
Mm.
in his project, you get this sense of like he wants society to be structured slightly different, which I think we all do, you know. But do you have a sense? Yeah, what do you think about that? Is
I think what Jordan Peterson mostly focuses on is how things should not be. I
hmm,
think if I were to try to convey his message
yeah,
in the broadest possible terms, he most often says this is not the way things ought to be. Not necessarily what we should do.
okay,
Granted, there are still many ways in which he talks about what we ought to do. I mean, he came out with a book called 12 Rules for Life. It's not 12 rules of what not to do, but
right.
granted, a lot of the things in the book are about what you shouldn't do.
Oh yeah, totally, totally. Don't
So
lie and yeah,
I think that message comes across stronger, at least to me, about his critique is what is wrong, not here's my vision of a perfect society.
sure,
Let's get
right,
and that's frankly how he rose to prominence was by saying I think this is bad, not
yeah.
here's what we should do. Does
Well,
that answer?
yeah. Yeah, I guess do you get the sense absorbing a lot of his like material? Do you feel like you get a sense of like an overall way he wants society to be? Because I feel like with enough critiques. Okay, so how does he want it to be? Like,
Yeah.
no, really.
Well,
Like, and you don't have to give the whole rundown, but like what are the main points? Because I try to critique one thing about him, and I feel like he says something else somewhere else, or it's hard to like know how. Yeah, how does he?
yeah, a society should strive to have um, equal opportunity. Maybe I'd be better off just espousing some of the things that he would fight
Please,
for or fight against.
totally, yeah.
Freedom of speech above all else.
It's
Equality of opportunity is something we should strive for. What? What's
I
up?
was just gonna say, above all else, does that mean something different from how you believe freedom of speech? Because we were saying there are some caveats. Or
I think it's probably the most important value in any sort of society that doesn't want to topple.
I just mean you were agreeing that like it's not an absolute. It's not absolutely
Yeah.
above all else. Would he
Yeah.
agree? Okay, okay. I
Yeah.
just want to
Yeah.
make sure.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yep. I think you would have a similar viewpoint to me
Sure,
based on everything I've consumed.
sure.
So equal free speech, equal opportunity,
Hmm.
not equal outcome.
Yeah,
He's a very vehement opponent against that. Um,
yeah.
do you want to hear more about economics?
I honestly want to hear more about the social side. Like he seems to. I mean, obviously he's a psychologist. Like, how does he want I guess families and like social like societies to work? Does anything come to mind of like how he wants?
That's such a complicated question.
Yeah.
I've consumed weeks of Jordan Peterson's
Yeah.
content. He's dense.
Yeah.
He comes across like an academic. I have trouble understanding some of the things that he talks about. I'm
Sure,
watching his
sure.
massive meeting lectures. For me to try to convey exactly what his message is in a couple sentences would be a great disservice, and
Okay.
I don't think I could do a good
That's
job of it.
that's fine. And I could never do that with anyone I listen to. I read like a book by someone and I'm like, what did I just read? But
It would be easier if you asked a more specific
yeah, I
question
got one.
guy to distill his ideologies into how he would react.
Does he believe in gay marriage? I guess is the first thing to come to mind.
I think he believes it exists.
Does he, in his ideal society, would gay people be allowed to be married? Does he recognize
Yeah,
that?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
This is a specific one, like non-binary people and gender. I've literally seen a quote where he says non-binary people like are just confused and wrong about themselves, and it's like a thought they have about themselves or a belief, but not true. And then I've also seen him say, obviously gender is a spectrum, and it's obviously like some people don't fit into either binary. So does he believe like non-binary people like don't exist? Do you have a sense of that, or does he lean more towards one side or the other?
So he's this I can respond to.
Yeah.
He had come out a number of different times when challenged on this specific view.
Yeah.
I think he splits those groups into different subsets. So he's come out and said, I think that sex and gender are closely linked and highly correlated, but they are not absolute. It's not, I am male and thus my gender expresses as what one might expect.
Yeah.
But he says that sex and gender, are highly bimodal. So there are clearly two most common, if you look at a statistics distribution, there's clearly two modes.
Sure.
But there are outliers.
Yeah.
And if you were to describe, as you said, non-binary, I think that he would say there are truly some people that would fit into some sort of unclassifiable thing, or I should say that not fit into male-female.
Sure.
For example, intersex.
Sure.
Which is a different genotype.
Right.
But most of the people caught up in what he would say is like a wave of progressivism, maybe, are kidding themselves. And that they are confused.
How does he know that?
I don't know. He's a clinical psychologist, I guess, is what he would say. Is gives him the right to talk about it and offer an opinion.
But that is not a widely held belief in psychology.
Yeah, but that's what gives him the right to say it, is that he is a clinical psychologist, just as another clinical psychologist in the field would have a right to say something about it.
But if you're speaking insofar as you are your profession and disagreeing with a huge amount of your profession, it seems like the burden of proof is on you to prove what you're saying.
So let's talk about transgenderism specifically.
Yeah, because I know it might seem like a small thing, but it is such a flashpoint for his views, I feel like.
So he's been asked, like, would you call a transgender person by their preferred pronouns? And upon being asked this, he thinks very long and quietly about this. And, well, what, you don't like his brooding, pensive look?
No, it's a fucking easy question. But yeah, what does he say?
So he says that, like, if it were a student in his class and he thought they were serious, yes.
Okay. So it's subjective, essentially. It's based on his feeling.
Yeah. His sense of whether or not, like, if it's a student that he's known for a long time and he has a sense that he knows what this person is about, they're a little bit about their psychology, their personality, and he thinks that they're being genuine, yes, he says he would.
So if he meets someone and they look to him, they're like female presenting, but they say I'm non-binary, or they say like, no, I'm a male, I'm a man, like I use he, his pronouns, would he not call them because he doesn't know enough about them? Or?
Potentially not.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I mean,
I don't want to be the Jordan Peterson whisperer.
Yeah, I don't want to make you do that, but it's fair to say, because obviously his whole rise to prominence was taking issue with gender pronouns, essentially.
With the free speech issue. That's how he would convey it, is as he took issue with a free speech issue that happened to be on the back of transgender rights.
Okay. So sex and gender are correlated. That's what scientists say too. Everybody agrees they're correlated. And they're different. Do you agree they're different, or?
Well, I remember growing up and saying that they were interchangeable, as in they were the same thing. It's like sex and gender
Yeah.
were the same thing.
Sure.
I understand the distinction being purveyed. So I
Yeah.
understand the split between the two that is being communicated.
Yeah.
And it seems like it's a bifurcation that has limited use, but isn't based in nonsense.
So yeah, so you would say that like if someone like masculinity is different from like having a penis and like and X what the fuck are the chromosomes? XY chromosomes. Like masculinity is different from those things. You would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say so. So I think what we're describing is genotype versus phenotype, at least right there.
But those
So
are
like
both biological, right? Like those are both I don't remember the distinction. I think genotype is like genes and phenotype is like how the genes are expressed, right? And stuff, but like yeah. But I'm saying like someone could be genetically and phenotypically, I assume, like uh male, XY chromosomes and so on. And like over let's say a few years or who cares how long it takes, like they express more feminine sides. And at a certain point they say like I don't identify as a man at all. You know, I'm like yes, my genes are the same, those didn't change, but I'm not a man because I don't have any of the masculine traits and I don't want to. And for some people it's like deeply painful to
yeah,
even like see
I
their
bet.
penis and stuff. Yeah. So like so like yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like why not call people by their preferred pronouns when they
For
want
what
to
it's
be?
worth, I think those people really do exist, and I believe that they are afflicted by a very troubling disorder that needs to be treated with as much compassion and therapy and societal help as is proportionate. I think it's a
Yeah.
real affliction for a probably large subset of the people claiming that.
Yeah, like gender dysphoria. Like I mean, that's what it's called.
Yeah,
Like yeah.
which is a mental disorder. I mean, any other type of discombobulation, if you'd call it, where what's in your body is conflicting with what your mind is thinking.
Yeah.
If you looked at it outside of the lens of what's become a very popular social topic, I think you would probably end up conceding that it is a mental disorder. And in the DSM 5, it's been captured that way for many years. I think
Yeah.
correctly.
I don't see the utility in calling it a mental disorder. Because
Because
homosexuality was called a mental disorder. I mean, it doesn't seem useful, but yes. But the mental disorder, if we're calling it that, is the specific symptoms of suffering that someone goes through when their gender is not matching their sex. Just to be clear. Like that's
yeah,
gender dysphoria comes from your gender not matching your sex. And like sometimes you don't know that for quite a while or so on. Some kids literally start feeling this way when they're like 10, and you could say it's culture and so on. But like so yes, people suffer. So what do you think should be done
can I
for the
bifurcate? You invoked homosexuality
Oh
as an
yeah,
analog,
yeah, yeah.
and I think there's a very clear distinction to be made.
Yeah, that
I
doesn't have the same like fighting against your body type of thing that you were saying. Yeah.
exactly. You can be a homosexual and live a completely normal life as long as society doesn't persecute you.
That's the same exact thing for being trans.
I just want to make that super clear that that's how I feel. You
Oh,
want to
totally. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I knew you meant that. I was just referring to being gay because just to say like calling it a mental disorder doesn't have any like explanatory value.
I think it does.
So, but trans people and the experience of gender dysphoria that people have, like it's very hard to say that that's just from the way they interact with their body because it also comes from how they're perceived socially. So it's very hard. We don't have like a control of like someone growing up in a vacuum and their sex not matching their gender. We just have a society that treats people as bad
Yeah,
when they're
but you could make that argument for then any mental disorder. For schizophrenia, you could make the same exact argument that it's only because they live in a framework of a society that doesn't accept that as the normal modus operandi.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think it's like way easier for society to accept, like to adapt to like trans people than like someone who's
That's a
like,
different argument.
okay,
The
well, I
ease
guess,
of
yeah.
acceptance into the folds of society is not a good argument for declassification of it as a mental disorder.
Yeah, I don't, I mean, I think like first of all, as a therapist, like I don't even use the word disorder. Like I'll use it here and there,
I'm
but
sure you don't. It would be
yeah,
probably offensive to a lot of people.
I don't think it's very useful. Like it to me, it's like yes, there is a lack of order in your experience, and maybe that's helpful in some way. But like calling it a disorder, I don't think it has much value. I'm just being honest. I don't think it's like a slur or something. I just don't think it
I
has a
think it
lot of value.
implies that you need medical care.
So, what do you think should be done for someone who's experiencing gender dysphoria? And you don't have to know like everything, but like, what's your sense of that? Or
So if they're an adult, I think they should do whatever they want. Whatever they think is going to make them happiest, they should do.
yeah,
If you that includes um, genital mutilation, plastic surgery, hormone therapy, modern medicine has those things available. If you think that's going to bring you mental and emotional peace, I think you should do it. And
mm,
if you've done your homework, like you're not doing this on an impulse, if you
yeah,
really think it's going to help you, you should.
oh yeah.
It, that's a wonderful thing that our society is able to provide that infrastructure for someone.
And you think that because it doesn't provide harm, it doesn't cause harm, and it helps their gender dysphoria.
It's just an individual trying to
Yeah,
find a state of being that's going to cause them less psychic harm.
yeah,
If it isn't harming someone else and harming a sensibility isn't real harm, then they should go forth and do it.
yeah, yeah,
That seems perfectly reasonable to me.
yeah. So if you care about people suffering with gender dysphoria, like, why is it okay for someone to not call someone their preferred pronoun when we can assume
Right,
that
I
might?
can say whatever I want. If I'm not going to incite violence against someone, it doesn't invoke, it doesn't cross my boundary of where I draw the line at for free speech.
Yeah, and I'm not saying, you need to sanction someone, but why don't you find it objectionable for someone to take a stand against calling people their preferred pronoun?
I think it's probably rude to do so.
I would say it's morally wrong because you're causing harm to the person. If you think gender dysphoria is a disorder, it's because it's something someone's suffering with, right?
Okay, so it's morally wrong.
So it's morally wrong to like make people jump through these hoops and know you for 5 years before you call them their gender.
Okay, so it's morally wrong. So
Yeah.
what?
So it's this is the whole facts don't care about your feelings thing. It's like I care about people's feelings. I think people's feelings matter. And I think if I'm looking at a situation, I say one person is being forced to use a pronoun they're not so hot on using in this situation, and the other person is getting a decrease in dysphoria, which seems pretty significant. Like I'm like that person's being a dick if they don't call that person their pronoun.
I
So
agree.
so then when you see Jordan Peterson like make that into his free speech issue, why does the good parts why does that seem like a good thing, or why is that noble, or
Jordan Peterson was making an argument and you can disagree with whether or not he was correct, but he was making an argument that the government was compelling speech and would be capable legally of prosecuting you if you repeatedly called a transgender person by the incorrect or
Mhm.
non-preferred pronouns.
Yeah.
That was the argument he was trying to let rest his laurels on.
Then why didn't he listen to all the people saying that that wasn't true, like the Canadian Bar Association? Like the Bill C-16 literally made a law that was already a law provincially into a federal law. And the provincial law had never compelled speech, and in the years since C-16 passed, speech has not been compelled in any case I was able to find.
Just because it hadn't doesn't mean it won't.
But you got to
That's not a good legal argument.
look at the precedent of a law that's been on the books. Look, the legal argument was made by the Canadian Bar Association. They're the ones who said this will not compel speech. So what gives Jordan Peterson the right to say it will? or not the right, but where does he get off doing that, and why is that something good for him to do?
So if everything you said is sound, I mean, assume good faith for a moment. Lend him that credibility, if you would.
Okay.
Assume he's pursuing an argument in good faith.
Okay.
If it's in bad faith, you really can't trust
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
someone
Let's
doesn't
say
have
he
an
really
ulterior
thinks
motive.
this is a
Yeah.
slippery slope. We're going to be compelling speech and so on. Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially the crux of the argument, is that he thinks that a power has now been given, a door has been opened that can't be closed to the government being able to compel speech.
Do you think he was
And
right or wrong? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
as a scholar of Soviet Russia, he feels very strongly against anything that could get us closer to that as a society.
It's all great to be a scholar of Soviet Russia, but I have a hard time not seeing this as like overreacting. Like if I was like a scholar in like mass shootings or something, and then like every time I like saw like a disgruntled young white boy, I was like, he's gonna cause a mass shooting, you would be like, I don't think you're as much of a scholar or applying your knowledge in the way that you should be. Like he was applying his knowledge, I would say, wrongly. He was literally wrong. He was legally wrong according to the law. Like nothing's happened since, nothing's happened before. The Canadian Bar Association at the time, I can send you the letter, told him this will not compel speech. So he was legally wrong. I think he was morally wrong too. I don't think he has any right. This is not the hill to die on, I would say. It's not a free speech issue, actually, in any way. So I guess I see it as he was wrong. He was literally wrong. This is not a free speech issue. And so when you make it about free speech and you find out you're wrong, admit you're wrong. I mean, he never did anything to like admit he was wrong about that.
He still thinks he's correct.
But like, no, like other people who are not fans of him don't. Like everybody who looks at the situation with any neutral lens says like that did not, has not compelled speech. And
who do you define as being this neutral arbiter of ethics?
I mean, I really just keep going back to the Canadian Bar Association because
I don't think they're a neutral body.
Okay, we don't need to rely on what some neutral person thinks. So, like, do you think he was right? Like,
yeah, I did. I mean, you're causing me to. I wouldn't say you've successfully caused cognitive dissonance, but you're casting doubt. I respect your opinions, and I know you're a smart person. So if you arrived at that conclusion,
I mean,
maybe there's something to it. So perhaps I've read the bill. Perhaps I need to reread it and read some of the ancillary criticism.
I don't think it compels speech. I think all it did was add it literally, like, trans people weren't part of the human rights legislation. It said, sexuality and stuff, but it didn't have gender. And so, like, trans people are being recognized. They're saying, hey, they deal with a lot of oppression. Let's put them on this list. And then it's like, could it lead to misgendering being categorized? Yeah, but it would be taken to court. Like, it would not and has not and probably will not. But I don't know. Anyways, whatever. I think he was wrong about that. And I think if it was a free speech issue, it wouldn't come along with this baggage of like that other thing you mentioned of like, he has this way, if I understand someone enough, I'll call them the gender they want. I think that proves that for him, it's not just a free speech issue. It's a we could say ideology about gender and sex. But
I think those are separate issues that you're connecting. I think you're attributing motive to him because of a separately held belief. I think that it could be, whether or not you think it is, it could be a good legal argument independent from his personal view on whether or not he would want to call people by their pronouns.
I just think it casts doubt on the purity of his
reasonably
argument. Yeah. I think
it's like so.
Yeah.
Casting doubt is not it's not like you've got it, Sherlock.
It doesn't prove it. It's not like we got him, like I can bust in the door and get him.
Cast doubt is fair to say.
It's like if I was saying like, like people should be allowed to play music as loud as they want, and it's like just because I play extremely loud music all the time, you would be like, okay, I agree maybe with your point, but like your motivation might be a little, I don't know. Whatever.
I mean, like when Congress passes a law that Congress can't be investigated for insider trading.
Oh my god, I fucking hate so much.
Not to digress, but like
Yeah, I hate so
that
much
would
about
be
Congress. I want to ask because it's all related to this. Like, do you view like virtue signaling as like do you use that expression? Is that something you think is like a problem? I know that's something.
I wake up, brush my teeth.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. I don't know how to ask this, but yeah, do you view it? Because I know that's something he talks about and a lot of other people in the similar field. So like, do you view that as a problem? And I'll just build it in so it's not like a gotcha moment. But like, if virtue signaling is an issue, how was he not virtue signaling that whole time?
Yeah, I mean, if he was making a good legal argument, he wasn't virtue signaling.
Okay.
If there was no legal basis for what he was saying, then it probably was virtue signaling.
Right.
It probably was him trying to implant his own values.
Right.
I don't think that's what he was doing. But if there was no legal basis for what he was arguing, then yeah, I think that opens the door for a lot of what you said to be true.
Yeah, I just have such a problem with virtue signaling because it's like, well, you know, in a lot of ways, that's a good thing. You're signaling a virtue. Maybe people can notice that virtue. Maybe they share it. Maybe it creates more good things. Like,
yeah,
virtue's good. What's wrong with signaling it? You know what I mean? But like,
I agree.
Yeah, but you know, there's a quote at the time where he's like, if they, you know, in his normal way, it's like, oh, super dramatic. It's like, if they take me to prison, I'll go to prison. And guess what? I'll go on a hunger strike. That's literally a quote. He says he'll go on a hunger strike in prison rather than call someone their preferred pronouns, I think, or rather than. I mean, I think it was rather than calling people, but
I think that you are now making a caricaturization of his argument, and I'm not saying that he did a good job being a bulwark against that, but I don't think he was trying to leave everyone with the impression that like give me freedom to say pronouns or give me death, but it's oversimplifying his argument. I really think if the government has that tool in their toolbox to be able to say that an individual can't say something because of how it makes someone else feel, that's a problem. So that's his argument. So whether or not it's legally sound, that was his argument.
Yeah, but it's not. It's such a fine line. I think that's why trans issues like get to this fine line of like facts versus feelings, because like you could say it makes people feel bad, but it's a very fine line between making someone feel bad and exacerbating gender dysphoria, which is like a causing harm type of situation.
Should I be able to tell a schizophrenic person that there's only like they don't have multiple or someone with multiple personality disorder telling them that they're wrong?
It's so not equivalent that it's hard to like know. It's not.
Where did I make a logical misstep?
Because like trans people are not out of touch with reality. I mean,
yes, they are. They are.
How?
Because they are of the belief that they are a different sex than they are.
No, they're not. No, they're not. I've heard many trans people say, I believe my biological sex is different from my gender. I'm well aware of that.
I would believe that those people exist. I would also believe that certain people do not believe that.
I think you're wrong. I mean, one of the biggest trans...
I am a woman. I've always been a woman, but you were born a man.
No, you're not born a man. You're born a biological male. Like, that's the thing. I follow trans people on YouTube and Twitch, and someone asked this one trans person, were you born man or a woman? And she said, neither. And another trans person who's one of the biggest YouTubers on the left, ContraPoints, I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She's very, very, like, one of the most visible trans women on YouTube. And she makes a lot of videos about being trans, and she's like, I am well aware that my sex is not the same as my gender. So I just think it's really the overwhelming view that trans people, who would know better than them? They look down and they're like, fuck that, I fucking hate that shit that I was born with that. You know what I mean? Like,
can I ask, does that extension go towards other, so that idea of someone knowing what they are inside, irrespective of their genotype.
Yeah.
So going against every cell in their body that has an
Yeah.
XY chromosome or XX.
Yeah.
Does that extend to other things such as race?
No. And here's why. Because it's like, it's not socially constructed in the same way. You can't, it's not like you get to just claim that you're a different race than you are, because it's not the same degree of social construction and the same type of social construction. Like race
Can you
is social,
explain how?
like race is socially constructed in like a fair number of ways. I mean, it's obvious that like the way you're treated by society based on the color of your skin and so on, and the
I agree with that. Race is different. Race is a real physical phenomenon. The way we treat people based on race is a social construction.
Yeah, I mean, like, race is a real phenomenon, so where do you find it? Like, in the body? Like, in what part of a person?
Melanin production, bone structure,
Yeah.
I don't know, various things.
Yeah, but like between people, there's like this goes into a lot of other stuff, but like I don't necessarily know that like melanin production is the thing that you would point to, because there's probably like a lot of different specific like things that are similar and different. Like they're between, let's say, black people, for instance, you could see a bigger genetic variability than between you and a black person. That's the case many times, as far as I've learned.
Yeah, of course, but
Yeah.
that's not the argument being made.
So where would you point to like the biological? It's just melanin production and like
There's plenty of other things, of course.
right.
I mean, you brought up black people, but like the prevalence of sickle cell anemia, for example, is very
Yeah.
clearly linked to genetics
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
is more prevalent in a certain race.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, people know so much more about this than me. I almost feel like I can't do it justice. But like, I just think race, like it's so different for someone to say I identify. Like if I was like I identify as a black person or something, like it would just be or what? Or what are you gonna
But
say?
you've always known that you're a black person. That's the way that you express your, race gets bifurcated at some point 5 years from now into the born race and
Sure, sure, sure,
the
sure, sure.
expressed race.
Sure.
I don't see a logical barrier to that ideology.
Looking at our situation right now and not going into the future or anything, but right now, don't you think it's worth noting that there are millions of trans people and almost no people who identify as a race that they're not?
No, I don't think that that's a relevant distinction.
Well, I think it is, because that's the reason why the thing you're proposing is an absurd example.
No, it's not. The number of people expressing that as their expression is not what gives that movement legitimacy. How many people say that their pronouns are zer?
Not a lot. I mean,
But a couple.
sure, yeah.
That doesn't make it less legitimate than saying that you're a woman if you were born a male.
Yeah, I guess it just like I don't think race is socially constructed in the same ways that gender are, and I guess I can't give you like an amazing argument about that. Like I just think it's kind of like there are a lot of differences. Like gender, like it's just a fact that there's a wide variety of how people express like their masculinity and their femininity and so on and everything in between. And like yes, there are different ways people express their race and so on. I don't know, man. It's just hard to like even know what to say. Like I get that you're making that as like a ad absurdum sort of argument, or like why can't people, do that, identify as that. But like I don't have a great argument for that. I just know that like that's wrong and doesn't happen. And like if it does, it seems wrong. I guess I'll learn more about like why it's wrong. But I do know that there are like millions of people who identify as a gender other than their sex. And the reason, just to get back to the schizophrenia thing, like the reason it's different from schizophrenia is like as insofar as reality exists, the concept of reality and so on, like it's a socially constructed thing. I think we can agree. It's not like there's like we kind of build reality together with our interactions. There's not like one set reality. I don't know.
You mean schizophrenia? Is that what you said?
Like in general, like schizophrenic people are not out of touch with like capital R reality as God put it on earth, is what I'm saying. They're out
I
of touch.
understand.
Yeah.
I agree with
Yeah.
the way that they navigate the world, just like autistic people,
Yeah.
isn't I don't know, physically wrong. It's just not a good strategy, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah.
That doesn't
Yeah.
fit well in the framework of our current society.
Right. And yeah, and in certain societies it could be less of a problem and so on. Yeah, totally. But like yeah, the point I'm just trying to make is like they're out of touch with like the socially constructed reality, which is why they have some, or part of why they have their problems. And there's a lot of biological foundations for that. I don't know, maybe like I guess what I'm saying is like trans people are not out of touch with like as substantial and fundamental a part of our socially constructed reality, if that makes sense. They might be out of touch with the socially constructed reality in more traditional circles and communities, but I think as our socially constructed reality is currently, there's far less that trans people like fundamentally need to be at odds with based on being trans than there is people who are schizophrenic and think, you know, whatever, shit's happening that's not happening, I guess.
Perhaps, but
Yeah.
you're asking people to go out on more of an intellectual limb in order to ask them to believe that I'm a woman than I am black.
Yeah, but
That's
like,
that's smaller leap, the latter.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I guess I want to just make the point like it's not about what you believe. Like people aren't being asked to believe anything different. Like I get if you don't believe, like, or not you, but I get if anyone like has a hard time with gender and sex being different and how trans people come to understand they're trans or something. But like it's really just about respect for, you know, people's
I
humanity.
get that that's where it's coming from,
Yeah.
but it's taken on something a little bit different that's very ugly. I mean, I started off this topic by saying that this issue need be met with passion, or
Yeah,
ought to be
yeah.
met with compassion, sorry,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and understanding for the personal struggle that someone's going through. I mean,
Yeah.
at least on a personal basis,
Yeah.
that's how I navigate this.
Yeah.
From a broader societal standpoint, I don't think there's like a trans cabal that's like plotting to take over the government through compelling people to use their pronouns. That's
I
certainly
wish.
not how I want to come across.
Yeah, no, you don't sound like that at all. No. And I guess with the compassion thing, it's like I think I've heard Jordan Peterson say this, and I have the sense it's a commonly held belief by people who agree with him about stuff, that it's actually not in someone's best interest when they're experiencing gender dysphoria to call them their preferred pronoun, right? Like that's a belief he has, right? Like
I've heard him say that,
yeah, like
yeah.
you're doing them a disservice, and I'm actually helping them by calling them their, you know, biological sex pronoun. I think that is fucking bullshit. I think that is putting your feelings above someone else's feelings, not objective truth over someone else's feelings. I don't think that's right because there isn't an objective truth in this case. He's just saying that sex and gender are similar enough that he gets to do that, which is subjective. Like, so I think the compassionate thing to do is to call people by their preferred pronouns, like super small thing to do. And I don't think there's any evidence for calling people by their not preferred pronouns being the compassionate way to deal with someone.
I think you could make a good argument that that's not the compassionate way to go about doing things,
Yeah.
or that he's not being a good clinical psychologist by doing that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I would argue that. Yeah.
Both of those things. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I probably, yeah. I mean, I'm not gonna die on that hill. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like it's an interesting case because it shows how feelings do matter, and I think that's why it's such a flashpoint. Because people's feelings are not just their sensibility and their feelings get hurt. Trans people kill themselves at higher rates. You know what I mean? Like they're harassed.
Pre and post.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, yeah. And it's like, yeah, they're targeted, they're harassed, they're oppressed. So when someone comes out and rises to fame, making a free speech point that hinges on his right to not be compassionate, essentially, it's just like, cool, man, good for you. But like, there are millions of trans people now experiencing probably greater amounts of harm than they would have if you didn't rise to fame doing it.
You snuck a premise right in there about trans people are killing themselves at exorbitantly high rates proportionally or disproportionately.
Sure, yeah.
That they're oppressed, they're attacked or bullied. I didn't
Yeah.
use the right words, but that's what you
yeah.
can. Are you linking the two causally?
Do I think people being harassed and verbally abused increases
Is why they are killing themselves?
I think it increases the risk of suicide when people are rejected by their family and friends. Yeah.
Is it like
I think it substantially, significantly, and statistically increases risk of suicide for people to be rejected by their family and friends and communities. Yeah, I could find sources. I'm pretty sure. I mean, doesn't that seem?
Yeah,
that seems logical.
That seems pretty logical to me.
It's just I really, that's my morality with everything. Is harm being done? That's the most important thing. You don't want to go over the top and like people's. You shouldn't be allowed to criticize anyone for their feelings and so like because their feelings might get hurt. But like, it's such a small thing.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I don't think that we really we probably disagree on a little bit about this, but I don't think we really disagree too much until we start talking about children, because that's where I see the real harm being done in the transgender topic.
That's a really good point. I hate to do this. I actually do have like bladder issues. Can I go and just run right back? I'll just give you a second.
No, don't come back.
No, I would really like to. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to. It's just when I don't have a good argument, I have to use it as an excuse. But just 1 sec. Yeah, I gotta be like, yo, dude, tell me the stuff about children with. No, okay, 1 second. Hey, I guess I just want to say, I hope it doesn't come off like I'm like trying to force you to change your views or like coming at you or something.
You're shoving your trans activism down my throat.
I really okay, I remembered back at Passover, like in 2018, I think. I remember you asked me like what my feelings were about trans stuff. And I just want to mention this because at the time, I mean, I really knew almost nothing. And I remember what I said. I said, like, I don't have a dog in the race. I think I remember saying that exact expression. I was like, which sort of is the same thing it led to where I am now in the sense of like, yeah, I would call them by their pronouns because why not, basically. But since then, I really have learned an enormous amount. Like, I follow people who are trans on the internet. I know people who are trans and non-binary. And, like, I understand it a lot better than I did then. That's all I wanted to say. And, like all this stuff I'm saying is because I've grown in my sense of seeing them as an oppressed group. I do think they're unfairly treated, and I care about that. I really do want to fight for that. And so, yeah, that's just my point. I really have grown a lot since then in my understanding of trans people and social issues generally. It's amazing that I made it through a master's social work program without knowing as much as I didn't know. I mean, honestly. But.
Well, I'm proud that you've transformed yourself and your beliefs.
Just wanted to say that, yeah, because
you're bragging, I guess.
No. I guess my point is just like. It's interesting. If it's worth noting, like I've genuinely changed a lot since then. One thing I've learned, for instance, is how hard puberty is for trans people. And I understand. I don't want kids to make bad decisions that are going to affect their lives. And I do think the limits on children's agency is an important question, and parents need to have a significant role with a lot of things. But I have learned, and it makes sense when you think about it, puberty is essentially torture for someone who knows they're trans already. So what do you do about that? You know what I mean?
It's a super tough question.
Yeah, I don't want kids to make bad decisions. I don't want teachers or counselors to coach kids into transitioning. I don't think that's a big thing. I think that's an incredibly small thing.
Teachers convincing people to transition, you mean?
I just feel like that's a talking point I've heard, or teachers, counselors.
How about peers?
That's an interesting question. Yeah, peers, like, is it socially, advantageous in some circles to be trans? Like, maybe, yeah. I mean,
the answer, I believe, and I will support this with as much data as I can, is yes. Overwhelmingly, yes. Which is problematic, in my opinion, because you're going to get people who otherwise may not have realized that they were trans, figuring it out earlier, taking hormone therapy, and having potentially much happier outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
That's a positive from that.
Yeah.
You're also going to have false positives.
Right.
And that's extremely problematic.
So what do you
This
do?
is it's not an easy thing. I'm not purporting to have the answer.
Yeah.
I'm simply pointing at a problem that I think is under discussed in our current climate. And I don't think it's fairly recognized by the pro-trans community as being a cost, I guess, of all of the progress that they view they're doing. It's a serious problem, and I think I can support that.
Yeah, and like, I mean, certainly some people detransition. I mean, I've certainly heard of that. Some people decide they were wrong to transition and detransition.
It's a lot to go through, dude.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, so is your sort of I guess assumption, I'm not trying to call it just an assumption, but is your premise like that there are more people who make this bad decision and are pressured or coerced into it than the people who make it right? Or
that's a good question. That one I don't know.
Yeah, and I don't know that should even be the basis anyways, but it's certainly a thought.
If what you are optimizing for is harm, as you said earlier, the answer I think should be maybe.
Yeah.
If you want to make your metric that you're trying to optimize for total number of people expressing the correct gender.
Just like, no, just total good feelings. Total good human happiness, really.
Shoot everyone up with heroin or Soma, you know? And now we get to Huxley.
It comes that you crash, I think. There's too much of a crash. But yeah, no, of course, like genuine happiness. You know, not drug-induced happiness.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. And in fact, genuine happiness is still drug-induced. It's organically sourced. You're producing it in your brain rather than eating it through a pill and then producing it through your brain.
So it really does happen a fair bit of time that you have like 12-year-olds, you know, like identifying as a gender other than the sex they were born as. And like, what do? Like, they obviously need to talk to someone about it. Like, they're going to need to talk to a therapist. They're going to need to, you know, figure out like what the heck is going on. So how do you, in a process like that, how do you know when someone's being coerced and when they're just like discovering themselves?
Statistics. It's very difficult to do. There's two analyses I think that are useful. The overarching statistical analysis. So you look at trends over time, and if you see things skyrocket, you try to figure out how much of it is due to more people feel empowered than they previously did, and they realize this is a legitimate path forward for them that didn't exist. And you weigh that against how many are people who are erroneously doing this because they're following some sort of social trend. And I think if the number grows exponentially year over year to the point where it's like 10% of your population, you start going, I don't think that this is all correct. This is probably a social contagion effect.
Sure.
And there's good ways to do rigorous statistical analyses about this.
Sure.
And there's pockets where you can see this phenomenon existing, this social contagion. And I don't know if you've heard of it. Perhaps it's controversial, but Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage.
Yeah, I have heard of it. It's very controversial. Yeah.
Yeah. So in it, she describes a social contagion effect, this mechanism that is disproportionately found in adolescent females, in which if one or more trans people come out as wanting to transition to male, their friends are disproportionately likely to also claim the same thing.
Sure, I believe that. I mean, yeah.
I mean, adolescent females, the ones I knew, were highly suggestible to social pressures from their peers. Why would this be any different?
I can't agree with that. I don't think women, I mean, I don't know. But I think women are probably, as equally as men socially suggestible. I think it's just probably looks different, but I,
Really? You think so?
yeah, I mean, men are adapt to each other all the time and change themselves for each other all the time, and I mean, hide parts of themselves for each other, and um, but I'm just curious, like, because I haven't read that book, and I haven't even listened to any criticism of it, but I do know one of the channels I watch on YouTube has a whole thing where they criticize it. I'll probably watch it eventually. Um, do you look for criticism of that? Have you heard criticism of that, and does it resonate with you at all, or what is the criticism of that?
I haven't sought out criticism for
Yeah,
that particular book.
yeah.
No, I haven't.
I wonder because I know it's controversial. I know people debate about it, but okay, yeah, like there's some social contagion. Like yeah, it's just like so. What do we do about that? Like obviously people are influenced by their peers. Very hard to say like how much of it is good and how much of it is bad because you get the acceptance and the ability to come out and so on. But I guess the question is like, do some people use this type of information to say when we accept trans people, we're actually doing harm? Because I feel like I've heard that.
I'm sure some
Yeah.
people are going to take what was a book made in what I believe was good faith, to try to help protect young girls,
Hmm.
and will take that and go, see, look, trans is a problem.
Right. So,
Those
yeah,
people, ignore
yeah,
the people looking to grind an axe on some
yeah,
sort of topic. I'm not interested in talking to those people, and
yeah,
there won't
yeah,
be people like that on this podcast.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, not for very long, anyway.
yeah,
I'm simply interested, as long as we're talking about trans as it
yeah,
affects
yeah,
children,
yeah,
which we currently define as people who are under the age of 18.
yeah,
I'm interested in looking at some of the harm that furthering this movement,
mhm,
called a civil rights movement,
yeah.
we ought to be careful about the harm that we can do if we
Yeah.
don't push back where appropriate,
So,
or
how do you,
classify, or potentially this is why it could be useful to classify it as a mental illness.
why?
Uh, well, so you could potentially protect children from making bad decisions for themselves that they'll regret later on.
But the mental illness is gender dysphoria. It's like the discomfort with your gender, with your sex. And so, like, the way to help people with that is essentially like therapy. And then like they talk to a therapist and then they ideally figure out on their own if hormone treatment is something they want. If it's
Yeah,
yeah, if it's going to help with the symptoms and so on.
when you're like 12, you don't know that, or 14, you don't know that.
You don't. But like so I was just looking into this one case that just happened in Vancouver or has happened in the last few years. Maybe you've heard about it because I do think Jordan Peterson's actually been talking about it too. Where like a dad was just arrested for misgendering his son uh, in public interviews for like years, while the son, because the court ordered him not to, because I don't want to get into all the facts. Anyways, like people, like a kid transitioning can, like, say a kid's 13, 14, wants to transition, and their parents get in the way, which is what happened in this case. The dad wouldn't give consent to the hospital to do hormone treatment and actually took his son to court. So the son had to go to a different court. And essentially, what the hospital did, and this was in the court records, and what I assume happens in most cases, is doctors have to determine whether the child can consent. Whether the child talks to multiple doctors, and the doctors have to determine, does this kid understand what the hell they're getting themselves into? Because it's a big deal. And the question is, who gets to make that determination? I would say multiple doctors checking each other's work and so on.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I don't want minor kids to make bad decisions either. But it's like, if a 14-year-old does want to start hormone treatment or something like that, obviously they would start with things that are slightly more reversible. Maybe their voice won't fully change back. It's possible. Maybe there are things like that. But yeah, I guess it's just like who gets to make the determination of when the child consents. And if you think about it, it's a very big deal because those years between 13 and 18 are torture for someone who's gender dysphoric.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's probably why at least I think that's probably the biggest driver of the higher suicide rate.
Yeah, it's got to be. You're going through puberty. You're becoming more and more
What is going on with me?
Yeah, you're becoming more and more the thing you absolutely do not see yourself as, and it's like, yeah, it's absolute torture. And like, so what can people do to help a kid in that situation? Just talk to them. But like, yeah, I mean, honestly, if I was talking to a 14-year-old trans person as a therapist, and like they ultimately decided to transition, and someone read my clinical notes, if they were biased one way or the other, they could come to either conclusion, that I was coercing the child or that I wasn't. Really. Because the notes are very objective and stuff, but someone could say, oh, look, they were discussing that it would help the symptoms to transition or something. So I guess I feel like even the most neutral like guidance for a kid in that situation can come off as coercion or so on. And maybe that's true of social groups too. I mean, maybe kids are saying to their friends, you got to transition and stuff, but like, I mean, is that really causing a lot of people to transition? I don't know. It seems like the overwhelming thing is like a deep sense of like, I am not my sex, and I've felt it since I was like 5. I feel like most people feel that way, honestly, when they're transitioning, but.
Perhaps just because it's a hot topic, not that it's super useful to talk about. Sports, how should trans people fit into playing sports? Actually, you've been watching a lot more sports, so maybe this is a good.
It's a great question. I really don't know. I think there are a lot of people who understand this better than me. My feeling, like my just opinion is like, I don't really like that the genders are separated in sports in general. I guess they're not, or I think they are. Like, I think
some sports they are.
Yeah.
In some.
I think the sports should be. I mean, obviously there are physical differences between males and females.
Are there?
Yeah, muscle mass differences. Like,
I've had actual conversations with people in positions of authority in my university that took the position that there are not biological differences between men and women.
Yeah,
which flabbergasted me.
Yeah, I think that's stupid. I would say that's one of the that's a fringe view. As far as I understand, most like left-wing people acknowledge, like, of course there are like objective biological measures you can look at, like muscle mass or like certain other things, height, strength. Yeah, there are differences. I don't know. With sports, should trans people be able to compete? I guess I feel like yes, because like it seems like there's not harm done. like I don't know. I guess some people. I guess I don't feel like there's harm being done at all with like trans people. So I guess the good example would obviously be like a very strong man, a very strong biological man transitions and then plays in women's sports and so on.
You know who Fallon Fox is?
No, is that someone who transitioned?
Yeah, it was an MMA fighter fighting as a woman.
Okay.
So born biological male.
Yeah.
5 years old, fractured the skull of their opponent in 2 minutes, and the ref had to stop the fight.
Yeah.
Obviously, well, maybe not obvious because you didn't immediately concede this. I find it very problematic that a biological man can fight a female in a ring, and we call that some sort of sporting event.
Just out of curiosity, do the men fighting men ever fracture each other's skulls?
I've never heard of it happening.
Okay.
Maybe. But the idea of a biological man beating a woman for sports entertainment just doesn't sound great to me.
That's how I feel about MMA in general. But I don't know, man. I mean, I guess my sense is like, if that's so, what would we be looking at? Like, are we looking at their sex chromosomes in this case, or like would we be looking at like their muscle mass?
This is a better question, because
I didn't have an answer to that one. So
frankly, I would feel comfortable hedging my life savings on that bet that I could convince you that women fighting men is a bad idea. But basically you wouldn't have women's sports anymore at all because you'd have men just beating them in the open class.
If you said that these people like literally had to live their entire lives as a trans person, you still think a lot of people would transition just to be successful in sports?
No, wait. What do you mean?
Well, it sounded like you said there wouldn't be women's sports because there would be so many biological men.
There'd be enough of. I mean, you
Yeah.
said there's millions of trans people, didn't you?
Yeah, so so you're not saying people would do it intentionally. You're just saying there would
No.
there
Oh
would
my
be
God.
Okay, yeah, you're just saying there would be it.
Someone would, but
No,
I
you
doubt
didn't
it.
you didn't sound like you were saying that. I had to like ask
No,
about
but
that.
you wouldn't have biological women playing national sports anymore.
Okay, because there would be enough biological men that would be
Biological men that are in high school regularly beat the women's soccer team, the USA women's soccer team.
Mhm.
That's who they practice against.
I've actually heard that exact reference. Do you know where you're quoting that from? Because I think I think I've heard that in a video of taking down like a Paul Joseph Watson video. If you've ever watched his content, okay. Well, I just want to say I don't in the video I saw that was analyzing what apparently is that exact view. There were some real problems with that view being drawn. It was actually like a scrimmage match. There weren't even like the women like there was no reason to think they were trying their most. But anyways, okay. The idea is
3 years up to college. It doesn't really matter.
Okay. The idea is there would be like
Venus Williams, for example. Whatever. I don't need to. I don't need.
Yeah. I don't. Like, I guess I really don't know what this brings together. So many issues. Like, so you're saying like maybe it makes sense to like have people's sex chromosomes be the determining factor for the sport
seems
they can
like
play.
it. Because sex chromosomes are the thing that is linked to physical performance, not your gender expression.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess the question is like then if someone's lived their whole life, say like a biological man has lived their whole life as a woman and like is also really good at sports, then they just kind of can't play sports essentially.
You can play in the open class.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, I guess that's my answer. I really think they should all be open. Like, I don't think
They should all be open. You won't have women being able to play anymore.
Okay. Yeah, man, I don't know. I really don't have like a deep understanding of this issue. Like for me, like the whole like respecting people's pronouns thing is something I've thought a lot about. But like as far as like like the sports and so on and how that would affect things, I don't know. Like my inclination is like that person should be banned from MMA for breaking someone's skull, maybe forever. And like if you had rules like that, you don't really need to like prevent people
But just because they were strong?
just because there should be a rule that you can't cause permanent injury to your opponent.
What?
Is that crazy?
Oh, so you're pulling punches? I mean, it is crazy if you're trying to incapacitate your opponent in a test of beating the shit out of each other. Yeah.
So I guess I feel like I need to know how much injury is caused by just men on men. Because is it a significant amount? Like,
It is.
so then,
I mean, dude, football and encephalo. I don't remember
yeah.
Getting hit in the head over and over again.
Totally, not good for you. Like, yeah, if men are already like destroying each other, and you're like, that's the problem is people getting physically like injured permanently from a sport, right? And you're saying that problem would be worsened by allowing.
That is one of the problems.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like unfair competition and so on. Like,
How about records, for example? I mean, if you allowed Bruce Jenner to compete as Caitlyn Jenner in women's decathlon or heptathlon, you'd never have a woman break the record again.
Okay.
It would smash and eliminate all of the achievements that women have worked really hard for.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it makes me wonder, like, would there be positives? You know, we're focusing on negatives. Would there be
People would feel good about themselves for being able to participate.
Would there be broader positives of like signaling acceptance of trans people? Like, I don't know. Like, would there be any positives? I really don't have a great grasp on this issue. I don't know where to start. I guess I just feel um, like how much does like the sanctity of a sports competition matter? Like, it seems to matter a little, but like it's not like a moral issue to me. Like, all I care is about people getting hurt. So like, if allowing biological men to play in women's sports hurt more people, there needs to be some way to make that not happen.
You clearly don't care just about people not getting hurt. You watch sports regularly, don't you?
Right. I'm just yes.
They're entertaining,
I well
and they're
for
entertaining because they're competitive.
right. Right, but yeah. I mean, I want the sports to be competitive. I guess even fine if it made them like vastly less competitive. Like there would need to be some change to that. I don't know if that change would be limiting it by people's biological sex. It feels like if you limit it by people's biological sex, you're doing like some sort of just like broader harm. Like I guess ideologically, it feels like you're reinforcing that sex is like more important than gender or something. But I don't.
For sports, it is.
Maybe it is. Yeah, I don't. I really don't know. Like I
To be able to have that nuanced opinion, I think, is that
right.
we can pick and choose where we're saying that sex is the most important thing and maybe gender is the most important thing elsewhere.
I think that's a good point. And I think I've seen like left-wing people like definitely not take the oh yeah, absolutely allow do it based on gender. Seriously. I've seen like a fair number of left-wing people like
I believe you. Yeah, I don't think everyone thinks that.
yeah, specifically with this issue, like I've heard a fair bit of left-wing people be like I don't know. And like this is an issue that like warrants more investigation and so on. So that's sort of where I am. I really don't know like but yeah, I hear what you're saying. I don't want sports to be like, like changed forever just for some like woke point or something like that. There has to be some nuance to it. But yeah, I don't have a great grasp on that. That's a good question. I do not have a good answer to it.
It's whatever. It's not
Yeah.
that interesting. There's more interesting topics, I think, to talk about, but I wanted to have a gotcha moment.
You got me. Do you want to talk about toxic masculinity? What are your views on that? I was
So many social issues. By the way, I have about 5 more minutes and then I have to go.
That's good to know. Yeah. Well, we don't have to talk about toxic masculinity. Yeah, is anything on your
We
mind?
talk about it.
Yeah.
Do toxic male?
Well, I guess I'm wondering, like, it feels like people misunderstand this idea. Do you understand that, like, when people say toxic masculinity, they're not saying that masculinity is toxic? I mean, to me, that's obvious. Like,
They're talking about a specific brand of masculinity.
yeah. Ways that masculinity, yeah.
Like spreading my legs on the train. Or mansplaining.
Yeah. Super, like, the legs thing is obviously, like, not a huge thing. Mansplaining, like, look, I mean, have you?
Whoa.
Yeah, like
So
like
you telling me to look?
the mansplaining thing is like you're talking to a woman and you explain something because you implicitly think she's dumb, like, and it's like something that some men do unconsciously. Does it make them evil and terrible? No, it's something that people need to have their awareness raised because it's a bias. It's a bias that women are like less intelligent or something, and you don't want to have that bias, in my opinion. So that's one thing. I mean, toxic masculinity just gets into like locker room talk that goes like way above and like normalizes sexual assault and shit like that. Like that would be what I would call toxic masculinity. And
I
so,
think that would be a very good, narrowly defined example of a term that is very overused.
yeah,
Like normalizing sexual assault against women in a locker room
yeah,
would be an excellent example of something that I would be happy to call toxic
totally,
masculinity.
yeah,
I
totally,
think that phrase is super misapplied, though.
yeah. Yeah, I guess the mansplaining doesn't feel like I mean, it's not like a terrible problem we need to like stop immediately, but it's something I think worth noting sociologically. Mansplaining, I think it's a reasonable concept to say it exists. A man explaining something to a woman that he wouldn't explain to a man, because yeah, I don't know, but yeah, are there?
Do you think that trans men have the same propensity to mansplain that biological men do?
I think this is definitely a worthwhile thing to discuss. Yeah, I think I'm not like enough immersed in trans issues to be able to give you like a great answer to that, but like, yes, like there's like trans misogyny and there's forms of misogyny that would apply to someone who's trans. Absolutely. Like,
So I've been a woman my whole life, and then I go through hormone therapy, get a mastectomy, and I'm now a man. I'm Steve, and all of a sudden I start like turning to the women that I knew, and I'm like, I'm more toxic than I was before.
That's not what I'm saying.
I
No.
know, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
No, of
I'm
course. Yeah, I mean, if someone like women can be misogynistic. I mean, women can treat other women like, how many women supported Donald Trump after he said grab him by the pussy? I mean, that's like him normalizing sexual assault.
Oh, hang on. I don't think they're support. You're conflating two things. There were women that supported him after that came out.
Not
I don't think
because
they're like, hey, like, yeah.
I think it's a despite thing, right? Like they're
Yeah.
supporting him despite, like, yeah, of course, like, but I think it's fair to say, like, wow, that's notable. That seems like a big deal. Like that. I mean, I think we can agree that's normalizing sexual assault. Like, even though he was like,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Dude,
he's
I
like,
thought he was going to be done after that. I really
yeah,
did. And it was only after he wasn't done after that I realized that nothing was going to stick to him as a persona.
wasn't it like that day or the next day that the hacked emails got released? Like,
I don't know.
I
I
believe
don't
it
remember.
was. I believe it was immediately after that.
Yeah, because I mean, in political campaigns, if that is true,
Yeah.
political campaigns sit on information and
yeah.
then wait to release it at what they think is going to be the most opportunistic time.
But all that's just to say, like, yes, I mean, women can be misogynist, trans men, trans women, like anybody can be misogynist. It's like, it's social and cultural ideas that, look, I mean, men owned women for quite a while. Women.
Shame it's over.
Do you feel that way? Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
well, like I want to bring back the dowry. No, get out of here.
No, of course. Okay, I know you're joking, but like, do you recognize how that lives on in like our modern day? Like there are a lot of men who literally don't think women should have the right to vote. I mean, you're on Reddit enough. You probably stumble across that here and there. Like,
I don't. No,
okay,
I don't.
I saw it all the time when I was on Reddit and other parts of the internet. Plenty of men believe that. I mean, it's fair to say. But like, you don't believe that. I'm not trying to say you do or anything like that. But like, yeah, I point to that as a way of saying like historical oppression living on, just like systemic racism, which maybe we could talk about another time. But like, I see that dowry and that whole system as like living on in the way men treat women as like less responsible, less sort of, yeah, I don't know. And frankly, I see Jordan Peterson as playing into a lot of that with his male-female stuff. But
that I don't agree with. I think he does a good job upholding the differences between men and women without being belittling or demeaning to either men or women.
okay, so does he have a view of like traditional roles? Because I see that as like a little bit trying to force women into like a box.
I know he talks about like the big 5 personality traits and discusses how like men are higher in disagreeable. One of them, I don't know.
I know what you mean. I'm familiar. Yeah.
Women are typically higher, I think, in trade openness. He talks about like conscientiousness, and how that can shape and maybe describe, or offers a lens to look at the interactions between people.
Yeah. What I find so interesting about those things are those are surveys, right? People are self-reporting a lot of that stuff, which is like you need to take that into account because it's like that factors into how people view themselves, the social construction of what a man and what a woman is.
No doubt, but also there are objectively verifiable aspects as well, like the prevalence of how much testosterone you have coursing through your veins has a direct impact on how you're going to act. If it didn't, then trans men wouldn't want to get it.
Right. It makes you more into the masculine type and so on.
Masculine.
Yeah.
Well, there are some aspects of masculinity and femininity, I would argue most of them, that are biologically constructed, not socially. But I also wouldn't contend that there are some aspects that are socially constructed.
Yeah. I think I can agree with that. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously trans people want to change aspects of how their body is. I mean, because it makes them more of a man in the eyes of others or more of a woman in the eyes of others and so on. But I don't want to keep you long, but we got to do this again sometime. This
I
is
hit my time limit. I have to leave.
yeah, this was great. I mean, Josh, I hope you enjoyed it too, and
I did.
yeah.
I really did. I was a little bit surprised that we spent as much time as we did on those particular social issues, and that's probably not what either of us had in mind.
I did not expect that. I thought we were gonna be like going through the different things, but honestly, it's better to at least like deeply talk about one or two things. Like, I mean, the platform isn't like platforming that took a long time, but it has to, So, because
I would love to do this again
yeah.
anytime.